Good morning. This is the New York City Board of Standards and Appeals Public Review Session for June 24th, 2019. We'll begin with the appeals calendar. Sorry, new case.
Yeah, wait a second. Mike, it's yours.
Turn that one off. You got one? We got it.
I don't know.
New cases, item number 1, 2017-285A, 200 Amsterdam Avenue, Manhattan.
I recuse from this.
Okay, good morning. This matter was remanded to the board for further consideration by decision and order of the Supreme Court of the State of New York, dated March 14, 2019. Tomorrow, I will be making a motion to review the board's decision pursuant to Section 1-12.6 of the board's rules of practice and procedure. As board staff has already informed the parties, no further testimony or submissions have been accepted into the public record on this case since it was decided on July 17, 2018, because the court's remand instructs further consideration of arguments that are already part of the board's record. Okay? So you have already...
Continued hearing items, item number 2, 6713A. I'm sorry. Sorry, Madam Chair. 6713A, 945 Zarega Avenue, the Bronx. It's on the review session. You have the old one.
Yeah, this is just a review session, so in terms of 200 Amsterdam, we don't talk about it anymore, right?
Yep, we are done talking about 200.
Yeah, so those of you you're welcome to stay if you want to hear other proceedings, but it won't be about that. I'm still scrolling. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to wait until... Tomorrow is the hearing, if you want to hear the vote.
This morning it's on the review session.
Okay.
Okay, just recall that.
Once again, item number 2, continued hearing, 6713A4, 945 Zarega Avenue, Bronx.
Okay. For the commissioners and court's benefit, I asked both DOB and the appellant to submit their positions in briefs with a 10-page limit, attaching all documents that they rely on to make their cases. DOB's submission makes clear that the DOB filing history supports its and the board's positions that an accessory business sign was lawfully established on the site in January 1987 when permits to install 2 accessory business signs with the text Metro Self-Storage were issued to the owner of the building, which was Metro Self-Storage, which ownership is proven by a 1985 deed, and which usage as self-storage is established by an application to change the use to self-storage and a C of O for same. Could someone close the door, please? The change...
Thank you.
The change from a non-conforming use to a conforming use is an abandonment of the non-conforming use if the abandonment lasts for a minimum of 2 years. DOB's submission also makes clear that this accessory sign was in place for at least 3 years when building owner applied on April 12, 1990, filling out an official DOB PW1 form, and I'm going to cite to exhibits so that we have in the record for the court to find easily the exhibits. So that DOB PW1 form, Exhibit H, DOB submission of May 29. The form states to, quote, repaint existing sign on existing structure, variable copy Marlboro, quote, unquote, and to, quote, legalize the face of the existing sign, unquote. Proof that the DOB scrutinized the application for the accessory business sign is a May 25th, 1990 submission and a June 11th, 1990 submission of DOB sign-off of additional information. So there was an additional information form, which is Exhibit I of the DOB May 29th submission, which was provided by the applicant stating that Philip Morris Marlboro, quote, occupies the first floor with office space and storage for sales and distribution of cigarettes, unquote, on which were notes, handwritten notes, stating, see attached photos and, quote, rental payments attached. Additional information forms for the court's information customarily follow requests by DOB for further support of an application prior to permit and to clear DOB objections to what it considers to be an incomplete application. In its opinion, the court states, this is the court on remand, this court has searched the entire record and cannot locate any statements or evidence definitively identifying storage and or distribution of Marlboro products as the use of the warehouse. So the definitive, let's say the statements and evidence identifying storage are in those documents that are submitted by the applicant, and those are proofs that were contemporaneous representations of the applicant for the sign, requesting approval of a business sign made on official DOB application forms, which mandate the DOB signed off after requesting additional materials, which indicate that DOB signed off after requesting additional materials to establish the accessory nature of the sign and reviewing the provided materials by stating, quote, okay to consider as business sign. That was DOB making that statement. These contemporaneous proofs are far in excess of the sole proof provided to DOB in the 2368 case, which was an affidavit stating that the Hilfiger sign was accessory to the use of the space in the building for, quote, storage, staging, and repair of display fixtures, as well as administrative functions related to such use. That information was just provided on an affidavit. There were no other application materials provided. Although the contemporaneous record does not indicate whether the Philip Morris lease was presented to DOB, DOB provides for our record here calculations to show that the space rental income was 70% of the sign rental income, a further indicator of the likelihood that the sign was accessory to the business. And as an aside, the appellant here said that that 70% is not representative of the actual deal, but how much money the sign company is paid by the advertiser is completely outside of DOB's review capabilities. So it's looking at leases between the property owner and its tenants, basically. That's all it can do. And I don't know whether DOB actually looked at the leases because we don't see a notation saying see attached lease, but we do see attached rental payments. That they probably did have the information to do a calculation. So I reiterate here, I reiterate here in terms of the accessory use that the word accessory refers to the principal use to which the sign is accessory and not to the principal use of the building. This is again for the court's information. Many buildings contain many establishments, and where accessory business signs are permitted, each establishment is entitled to its own business sign. That's kind of standard language in the zoning resolution, which directs you to treat each establishment as if it were a separate zoning lot. And for our council, we should cite to that section in the zoning resolution. And with respect to the recent submission by appellant of a 1991 map purporting to show all of Philip Morris's warehouses at the time in 1991, which is Exhibit 2, appellant submission of May 29. They submitted that in an effort to show that the rental space was not in use by Philip Morris as a warehouse. I have to say it's impossible to ascertain what the criteria were for being included in that map. The sites servicing New York City are in Long Island and Westchester, and so I think it's not unreasonable to imagine that Philip Morris also rented smaller staging and management areas that were closer to their delivery points. So, you know, a warehouse could have been something that had to have 100,000 square feet or more, right? And that there's very little of that in New York City proper. In 1990, the applicant for permit states that Philip Morris occupies the site at the first floor as offices and storage for sales and distribution of cigarettes, which is what it says on that Department of Buildings PW1 form. There is no way for us to know whether that would have met the company's own 1991 criteria for warehouse, but it did meet DOB's criteria, sufficient to issue a permit for an accessory business sign after reviewing the materials, additional materials requested. So DOB also addresses the cases in their submission that are cited by appellants as claiming to have been sham leases. The appellants make that claim. DOB's papers show that in these cases, it rejected registration of a claimed non-conforming advertising sign because evidence in the record established the sign's history as accessory. That's the Flatbush Avenue location. And where, by contrast, there were also DOB situations where DOB accepted proof of the establishment of advertising signs based on ownership, occupancy, DOB permitting history, photographic evidence, and a lease with a sign advertising company, none of which were refuted by evidence of discontinuance. So those were cases where DOB did allow the advertising sign to continue. One is on Queens Boulevard, another at Laurel Hills Boulevard, and there were a couple of others cited. It wasn't clear to me, however, from the DOB's submission whether any of these signs were tied to what the owner contended were sham leases. There also wasn't a response about the sign at 9330 Van Wyck or 2109 Borden Avenue. So if DOB has something to say about that tomorrow, that might be a helpful way of tying this up. I want to add that I think it is unreasonable for this board or any sort of outside judge of DOB's procedures, its review operations, to expect DOB to dig deeply into ownership, tenant, applicant records and history each time it issues a permit. DOB reasonably relies on the representations of the licensed professionals, so they're architects and engineers, that are made during the application process, and they pursue the representations further where complaints are filed and irregularity is discovered or a violation is issued. So the idea for this board to set a standard that says that DOB now has to dig deeply into leases and outside deals, which are really exterior contracts that it has no control over, I think is far beyond reasonable and far beyond what the board should be expecting of a city agency. I don't see also the relevance of appellant's newly submitted corporation counsel brief on the 1992 Sievers case, which was Exhibit 5, appellant's May 29th submission, which is regarding the Newport cigarette sign above a gas station. Obviously, such a sign is not incidental to gasoline sales, nor is a Newport cigarette sign incidental to a gas station with a convenience store, as were the facts in the Mazza case on Jackson Avenue, which is Exhibit 4 of the appellant's May 29th submission. That case, which was cited by, I believe, by the appellant to the court during the trial. That, however, was not the situation in the case of either the Metro Storage or the Marlboro signs, which DOB found to be accessory upon contemporaneous receipt of acceptable proofs. As discussed at the last hearing, the 330 Bruckner Boulevard case has a fact pattern and determination closely resembling the subject situation, which decision was upheld by the first department, and certiorari was denied by the Court of Appeals. In that case, the BSA found substantial evidence to support DOB's determination that the signs were accessory, and that later affidavits from owners contradicting their prior representations and proofs were not persuasive. A copy of the BSA's and the Supreme Court's and First Department's decisions in the 330 Bruckner case should be included in the record for the court's convenience. The Supreme Court decision is very detailed and goes through the hierarchy of proofs that DOB accepts pursuant to the Technical Policy Notice 14 of 88, which is Exhibit A, DOB's June 5th submission, and which TPPN was applicable in the instant case, and which placed permits and other city agency records and documents as the best proof of prior use. And we've talked about this many times throughout the record in this case, but it's to try to kind of tie all this up. I also didn't find BSA cases included as exhibits in DOB's submissions. The court actually complained about that in their opinion, so I want to make sure that the court has copies of any cases that are mentioned included in the record. So any cases mentioned in these last two submissions should be included in the record. At the very least, an accessory business sign with the text, quote, "Metro Self-Storage" is installed pursuant to permit in 1987, or was installed, and remains there until it was removed sometime in 1990 to make way for the Marlboro sign. That is 3 years, and an abandonment of a non-conforming use cannot exceed 2 years. This view of timing is supported by the notations of a letter that we received much earlier in the record. A letter from Allied Outdoor, and actually it was submitted again in May this time. It's a letter from Allied Outdoor dated January 31st, 1996, from George Newman, who was the board chair of Allied Outdoor, addressed to Metro Self-Storage, and in it there are some notations by hand on the letter, because it's discussing a lease renewal, and the notations are initialed by an Allied Outdoor person named George Furphy, and those notations are dated February 12, 1996. A copy of this letter is attached to Exhibit M, is record number 0118, Exhibit M, attached to appellant's May 29th, 19 submission. The notations state that the lease would expire in 1998 pursuant to the terms of the lease 8 years from the erection of the sign. So since we know that it expires in 1998, 8 years from the erection of the sign is 1990. The note states that the 8 years would expire on March 31st, 1998, which is consistent with the April 12th, 1990 application to DOB to legalize the Marlboro sign. So they install, and then they go and they apply for a permit right after that. So that's consistent timing. DOB also described what the concept of legalization is, and the process with respect to signs. I had actually asked them to be more general about the description of legalization, so for speed, I'm just going to explain what I think it is. I just want to, and I'm doing this again, for the benefit of the court that actually didn't seem to understand what that concept meant. So a legalization, the term legalization, whether for a sign or for a building, refers to a situation in which a location is occupied for a certain purpose for which no permit or certificate of occupancy was obtained prior to the installation of that use, or no permit was obtained prior to the use and no certificate of occupancy was obtained following the use, hence rendering that occupancy, I'm going to just say, not legal and subject to violation by buildings inspectors. The violation will state something to the effect of, quote, "use not as indicated on the certificate of occupancy, discontinue use, or obtain permits to modify use." That's the standard kind of violation that you would get from DOB. Where the use is permitted in the zoning district, the filing of permits and application for a C of O will cure the violation by, quote, "legalizing it." Where the use is not permitted in the zoning district, the use cannot be legalized unless the owner can establish that the use predated the prohibition on such use in the zoning district, that it was installed pursuant to permit, and that such use was not discontinued for more than 2 years. Failure to do this requires removal of the use. Proof that the subject sign needed to be legalized is stated in as many words on the April 12, 1990 PW1 application form, and includes the amount of the civil penalty to be paid for the violation, which was $2,750. It is also very logical to conclude that these facts that had the applicant for permit in 1990 it's also logical to conclude from these facts that had the applicant for permit in 1990 had adequate proof to reestablish the sign for advertising purposes, they would have done that. And so otherwise, they had to legalize it some way, so they applied for an accessory sign. And so that's my opinion about that. Others?
I agree with you. I think what I found interesting, and I think we have always known that, but maybe the court didn't follow the sequence of the timing, was the sequence of the event, especially in this case, is critical with regards to DOB, thank you, DOB issuing a permit for an accessory business sign on the subject side. So in 1986, a sign application for the metro storage was applied for. It was submitted, and a permit was issued in 1987. On June 11, 1990, an Alt-1 application was approved to change the copy with Philip Morris Marlboro, and at that time, the Alt-1 also stated that Philip Morris maintained an active business presence, and based on that, they had said it was okay to issue that. The lease was from, was from 1988 to 1996 for the office space. At least that's the document. Now, all of this was prior to the issuance of DOB's OPPN, which was issued on December 30th, 1990. So this was all, 1999, I'm sorry, 1999. So this was all before, DOB recognized there is a misuse of the office space lease and these accessory business sign. And that got formalized on December 30th, 1999 through this OPPN 1099. And that precedes the City Planning Commission text amendment that the appellant refers to the CPC report dated December 12, 2000, where it refers to this so-called sham lease. So what I want to say, what I take away from that is that all along DOB had been, prior to the issuance of OPPN, was operating fully per its standard at that time, that they look at the sign, they look at the accessory nature of the use, and based on that determine that it's an accessory business sign and then permit that. And all those documents were submitted, they're evidence in a file, and and so to me that was clear. Now, as you mentioned, DOB cannot look beyond the representation made by a professional at that point. DOB should have revoked the permit, as the appellant said, yes, but DOB only does it when somebody notifies it. It's based on complaints. It is not able to go to every site and make sure that every permit that has been issued all throughout the city, for every case, not just sign, every case, to go and ensure that it is on a complaint basis. So had DOB known that, yes, they would have taken an earlier action. That's how they go about it, and those are the cases that they have indicated. So I think the Allied Outdoors knew very clearly that they could not justify a non-conforming use, and that is why it followed this format. What I also found appellant's assessment of the 6 cases that DOB had cited kind of misleading and frustrating, partly because I think DOB's statement states that when they looked at these signs, they recognized these signs as legally non-conforming advertisement signs. So the fact that there was an associated use on the same premise is irrelevant. So if, for example, in the Laurel Hill case, the fact that there was an advertisement sign for a liquor and that there was a liquor store on site is irrelevant. That advertisement sign could have been carrying a buy milk, so I don't think there is a correlation with an advertisement sign and a use that is on site, and there has to be, the advertisement sign can be anything. It doesn't have to be associated with the use that is occupying the space and what is being sold there. I think that was one of the connections they were making. At least that's what I thought.
I need a little more on that one, because it's, for instance, if that's kind of what you talk about. Like if you're selling, it's a liquor store, and you put up a sign that says Joe's Liquor Store, you could say that's an advertising sign because Allied Outdoor put up a sign, but actually it just switched to an accessory business sign.
It was a non-conforming advertisement sign. That's, my understanding is...
You need to finish the sentence.
Okay. So the DOB, based on the evidence provided by DOB, it was determined that this was a legally non-conforming advertisement sign.
Okay.
That was in existence prior to November 1st, 1979. So my point is that it is the fact that the Laurel Hill site had a liquor store, and that sign that was there also contained a product that could be sold on the site is not relevant. That's what really...
It wasn't advertising for the liquor store, it was advertising for liquor
it was
that may be
advertising
sold
that
at the
may be
liquor
sold
store.
there, and
Okay.
right, and it was irrelevant. So the fact that this was a legally non-conforming advertisement sign is where the matter rests. It was here, the situation is they are not able to establish a legally non-conforming advertisement sign, and that is why an accessory business sign route was adopted, which is different.
No,
Here,
so
these signs were there before 1979 as a legally non-conforming advertisement sign.
So that's what the applicant did way back then in 1990. But what I do want to clarify is here, both with the aid of the court, we decided that an advertising sign had been established prior to 1979, by 1979, right? And so the issue that's in discussion now is whether they abandoned that advertising sign. So so for me, you have to be careful with this discussion about whether a liquor sign advertised, because this is cigarettes Marlboro cigarettes being advertised by the tenant who is Marlboro cigarettes, right? So if
I take back what I said about Laurel Hill, then let me just remove it from the record.
okay,
then.
so yeah, because you need to take the logic all the way
Right.
through.
Okay,
right?
so I rest my case on where I said the sequence of timing.
Of timing. So I just want to point out again, if in case I left it out, there was a TPPN, so technical policy notice, that was issued in 1988, so it's the TPPN 14 of 88, which was the hierarchy of proofs that DOB relied on for any non-conforming use, both ones inside of buildings and for signs. And so it's not until the 1999 TPPN that they changed the proofs for signs alone. So this sign was right at this point. This sign was applied for right at the point where DOB had more or less just instituted this series of proofs, right? So okay.
So I agree with what the chair was saying. I think you laid out the argument really well, and I like the analysis. I just wanted to add a part about the appellant's statement in the beginning. It seems as if they felt that the board was punishing them for their sham by kind of insisting that the sham keep going as if it were the truth, and that the board needed to get out of the practice of punishing appellants. And that's a problematic argument for me, because it seems like they wanted Department of Buildings to see through their ruse, a ruse that, at the time didn't seem as if it was a ruse. It was a very well laid out, complete application for an accessory business sign that even actually went so far to show a contract to request a 3 square foot sign that would be on top of the door, that would be a wayfinding sign for customers who wanted to go to Philip Morris. So they thoroughly laid out their application for an accessory business sign. There was no way at the time that DOB could have known that this was a ruse. And the funny thing about it is, if DOB had expressed their suspicions about the sincerity of the applicant at the time, I think the applicant would have told them that suspicion of future illegal activity is not the basis to deny a permit.
Right.
And so it's kind of like DOB was kind of had their hands tied there anyway, even if they wanted to be suspicious. And yet they weren't. And that's because this was a complete application for an accessory business
Right.
sign. So I don't see that there was a ruse necessarily.
Yes.
I believe it was said all, and I don't have any further comments.
Okay. Commissioner Spetta?
I do look forward to the presentation tomorrow. I do want to say that coming from a legal background, a prior sworn statement, or I guess some may argue even a statement made against the party's interest, or they have a certain reliability with regard to evidentiary value. Now, that may not be the same evidence that's presented before the board, but I don't think that such statements can be so easily dismissed simply because a party's interest is now changed.
You don't think which statement?
A statement-
The statement that now...
What they submitted that is now considered a sham, I don't believe that that could be so easily dismissed now just simply because your interests, the applicant's interests have changed. It's now not in the interest to claim that that was a sham, that it is now in their interest to claim that those are sham leases.
Right.
It wasn't in their interest earlier to claim
Right.
that. So I still think that these are documents that were sworn, that were submitted, that were held to be true by the person declaring these statements as true.
The
And
affidavit or the earlier PW1 forms? Which statement? All of them?
All of them.
All of them?
If they're submitting something and saying it's something, to then claim that that has a certain value. Your own prior statements, your own prior applications have value. And I don't think it's so easily dismissed as a sham.
Oh, okay. So just because I'm trying to make sure that we're clear for the court ultimately, what you're saying is they made sworn statements, effectively their architect made statements on the forms back in 1990, and now you can't just dismiss them because those were sworn statements. And it doesn't mean that but are you saying that then the affidavit that's submitted in whatever year we did this, 2014, or it was later?
No,
It was earlier.
I'm not speaking of the affidavit in 2014 that claims that everything that happened prior was fake.
Yes, okay.
So I'm submitting the original documents that everyone relied on, that was, at the time, true statements, or held to be true statements, to now claim that they are false. I don't think we just easily dismiss those prior statements.
Right.
And if we do, they live by a sword and shield. They can, when it's convenient, it's true, and when it's not convenient, it's false. And that there's no way you can move forward in a proper manner if you're never held to what you state.
Right. Well, there's certainly fraudulent representation before agencies constantly, right? So that's a different thing, but in this case, they made for me, what's the most telling is this wasn't like it went to a plan examiner who just sat there with a rubber stamp and said, good to go, another sign, right? Instead, there was a request for additional information, which was submitted a month later. So they had to dig up the rent receipts, they had to dig up whatever the other proof was, and that was a request by the plans examiner to show that he needed more before the permit was approved, so the application was approved. So, okay. Thank you.
Move on? Item number 3, 21858BZ, 7740 Hewlett Street, Queens.
Photos were provided showing improvements made. I think the site looks good. There is a request to remove the planters that are close to the sidewalk. I'd like the applicant's rep to explain a little more about what that is. It was done, those planters were installed, they're just movable planters to prevent sidewalk parking, but maybe there's another solution that would work for the truck arrival and still do that. Maybe they could put some of those permanent sort of U-bars or something like that on the property line. I don't know what the answer is, but to just figure out what the issue is with the trucks. Because it sounds like the planters could be moved a little bit and maybe still have the effect. I don't know. Anybody else?
No.
Okay.
Item number 4, 53966BZ, 6119 Fresh Meadow Lanes, Queens.
The applicant submitted on May 1st a response to DOT's March 20th comment letter, and then DOT responded just on this past Friday with many additional comments that need to be responded to. They're all about the sort of safety issues around there, and even recommendation of, I believe, removal of a curb cut. Those are anybody else? That was what we were waiting for, really, was
Right.
DOT.
Yeah.
Item number 5, 2602, 1680 Richmond Avenue, Staten Island.
Okay, the remediation tent was removed as requested, and we had asked for a timeline for the to obtain the C of O, but the cover letter that was recently submitted requests an extension of 2 years to allow for a builder's pavement plan submission and review. And I know that can take like 6 months to get that through, so that's probably reasonable.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
No, it seemed okay.
Item number 6, 19702BZ, 2825 Nostrand Avenue.
The application was amended to reflect the current owner, which we asked them to do. So I know that there was a submission made to DOI to reflect that new owner, but we didn't get the DOI sign off yet, so we need that.
Check that, I'm sorry.
Fire department continues to object to the application, and they issued a new letter on June 2nd with recommendations. They continue to request that we hold off on a decision until proper filings of standpipe and fire alarm applications are made. So we have time on the DOI, but yeah. Anybody else?
They didn't address the signage issue about the banners.
Oh.
They did send in a letter from the architect about the AD accessibility, explaining that on the first floor, it's accessible to the street, and the machines and equipment that they have on that first floor actually are just duplicated on the other 2 floors.
Right.
We're on Nostrum. John, we're on Nostrum.
And that's the standard, so that's, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Item number 7, 20904BZ, 10909 15th Avenue, Queens. Is a request for an adjournment on this.
Right.
Item number 8, 18309BZ, 1400 5th Avenue, Manhattan.
Okay, we have proof of posting of notice of this hearing in the lobby, which is what we requested they do. We have photos that appear to show compliance with conditions without a statement from anyone that they do. The conditions require a limiter on the sound system. Instead, we got a photograph of the sound system. I don't know how to tell whether there's a limiter. And also the photos of the floor do show padding on the floor, but the requirement is 3/8 rubber flooring. So there needs to be, it's likely 3/8 because that's about the thinnest padding you could possibly get. And so I'm guessing that it's even thicker than that from the pictures. But we don't have any, it's sort of the pictures were just given to us. Like,
Don't
go
have the
figure it
specs.
out. Yeah, yeah. Fire department issued another letter of objection and asked again that we hold off on our decision until the applicant files an application for a fire alarm system. This was the same problem before. I'd like to find out what the applicant's progress on complying with that is. And again, just a reminder to our council that there's a request to change hours of operation, but that was something we discussed at the last hearing. Okay.
New cases, item number 9, 98283BZ, 19120 Northern Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. Community Board recommends approval. I don't see much work left to obtain a C of O. It looks like all the sign-offs were completed by 2016. I'd like to understand what the holdup is really. The last timeline report is from 2017, so, and perhaps the holdup is something to do with the subdivision of this lot. I'm not really sure what's taking so long, right? So I'm trying to understand in terms of the subdivision, is it a proposal to subdivide the zoning lot and then remove the portion that's not really subject to this variance completely off the zoning lot, or just to exclude it from our resolution? There's a big difference, right? I don't know if it's to remove the zoning lot. I'm not sure it's allowed, because this is a this is a classic Carlo question. It's originally a 1946 variance for part of the site, it looks like, for showroom with auto sales. And then there's a later one, because the case is an 83 BZ. There's a 1984 change in use from, I think this is the one where maybe it changed from a bowling alley to auto sales. So it sounds like this much larger site kind of somehow got larger under a new variance. And so
this was a new 7221 in 83?
Yes. Yeah, it was a special permit. It wasn't, no, it was a variance. It was a new variance in 1984. Like
So
when it
the
was
pre-61 got superseded?
It sounds like
Yeah.
it. But if you could just check this,
Sure.
because the proposal is to take out one of the lots that is not the subject of the waiver and just like put it over there. So I don't know whether it's off the zoning lot or whether it's just a notation in our record that says never mind about lot 11. And I know on another case recently, we asked them to subdivide the tax lot anyway. And so that, because that tax lot would operate as of right. So anyway, I just want to make sure that procedurally this is being handled the right way.
Now, I just want to understand, the subdivided lots, now 12 and 11, they were part of the condition, weren't they, to be used as parking lots for the...
No, so lot 11, which is the one they want to remove, doesn't have the parking for it, right?
now, but before it was one lot, now it is subdivided into 12 and 11. When it was one lot, it was part of the condition to use part of the lot for accessory parking.
Right, but so what they did though is, this is always the problem about defining tax lot numbers. They reapportion the tax lots, so lot 11 today doesn't look like lot 11 yesterday.
Right.
So it's hard to talk about whether it's the same lot 11 without looking at the drawings. So that's something that we should do, just to make sure that this is all right? And to make sure this is something we should look at, and the applicant really needs to clarify for us what was the scope of the approval before, what did the conditions apply to, and what's the proposal with respect to this removal of this one lot. Okay.
Item number 10, 170...
One second.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I
I
apologize.
think Commissioner Brown will say something, but
No.
I believe the description of the case need to be changed. They are requesting an amendment in addition to the extension. This is number one. Number two, I'm thinking of what the vice chair said. Lot
yeah.
number 12 was some way included in the language of the previous variance.
Right.
Yes, I understand that its use was partial. Not the entire lot was used as a parking lot, just part of it.
Right.
So if we gonna like amend this variance to change something on lot number 12, I believe we should be careful, making sure that this two things. Number one, that kind of amendment wouldn't impact the conditions of the previous variance. And the second thing, does this amendment mean that we're authorizing the subdivision? Is that?
No,
It's
so,
not.
so a subdivision is a DOB thing.
Okay.
So if they're subdividing the lot, we again procedurally need to make sure that the lot can be subdivided. If they're subdividing it off the zoning lot, they have to go to DOB and make sure that it doesn't create a new non-compliance by a subdivision, right? Not our department. So that means they have to go to DOB and make sure it's allowed. If they're simply subdividing the tax lot, which is, I think, already done, and asking us to not include it on the resolution, then I just want to make sure that procedurally we're allowed to do that, because I always think of variances affecting the whole zoning lot, and you kind of don't get to pick and choose which part is in, which isn't.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
just to clarify for Dr. Sheeta, so the reason for the amendment, if everything works correctly, is that we'd be approving a new site plan
Okay.
to reflect the new parameters of the zoning, the meets and bounds.
Okay.
So the amendment is correct, but I understand what Madam Chair is asking. I will go back to the office, look at the history, and brief everyone.
Right. So I think what he's talking about is what Commissioner Schitt is talking about is the description of the application just says extension of time, and it doesn't say amendment. So we should add that on the, yeah. And that's because they actually came back. You know, this has been here since 2016, and somewhere in the story, they decided to, we removed it from the calendar back in the day when we were actually doing that, and then sort of, they seem to have forgotten about it, then we sent them a dismissal warning, what's going on, and then they came back with this application to amend, so. Okay.
Item number 10, 17193BZ, 3245 75th Street, Queens.
Okay, we have proof of service of initial application and of notice of hearing to officials. We don't have a community board recommendation and really need one on this one, I think.
All right, I'll reach out to them.
Yeah. I don't have any comments except that the rear of the building, which they happily provided photographs of, needs to be pointed and painted. There's like these big diagonal cracks, which is never a good thing. And they need to show compliance with the open items that are indicated to be installed. So the little compliance letter from the architect indicates that street trees need to be planted, and there were broken sidewalk flags. Those are old comments, so it seems like that should have been done. Those are comments from 2017, so it seems like they've had plenty of time to install street trees and fix the sidewalk. So just to update us on that. Anything else?
I have a question. Are they proposing to amend the previously approved plan to add the mezzanine storage space and provide more parking indoors?
What?
They're proposing a mezzanine space and provide more parking indoors. I think they do need to amend the plans for that, and this is a
I thought the
question.
mezzanine was approved.
No, it was not. There was just a second floor rooftop parking.
The rooftop parking was never installed. they
It was
said,
never
right?
installed, but the previous plan did not have a mezzanine, so I just want to know if they, this is again similar to the previous case, they need to amend. And
So it needs to
I
file
also
an
want to know the condition of the fence along the easement, the rear easement, what is the condition of the fence? We didn't get photos of it, so if they could just provide photos of that. And they also need to remove barbed wires from the fence. I have to say, this is, I lived just right down this block when I first came to this country in 1981.
Oh,
And I did not know this was a parking garage then. So,
so in other words, they run silently. That's good.
this was 1981, so my
Yeah.
memory may have been my memory is probably fading now, but.
Oh, this
It's
is the one
interesting.
that was a bowling alley first, sorry,
Yeah.
not the other one.
So it was interesting to
before.
go there and realize that, oh, I live down this block.
Well, the grant didn't start till 1993. So
Yeah.
it
But it
could
would-
have been a bowling alley. when-
Yeah, right, exactly. It
Not
was
a
a,
garage.
it was a bowling alley
Yeah.
until night, right, like you
But
said.
along Northern Boulevard, there were a lot of car sales.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm not sure where the line ended in
Right.
terms of even then.
Right. Well, in 94 was the legalization of an auto storage, so I don't know how long it lasted prior to coming for a variance. Just according to the
Right.
record, it was legalization, so it might have been just at the moment when you moved there that it switched
And I-
over.
Yes, and I had no idea about bowling alley either.
Okay, so just to clarify, so you're saying that they should be filing an amendment also?
This is a question
Well,
I
we should
have.
They have to
Confirm.
look.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, have to compare the 1990, the 2003 drawings,
Okay.
where there was allowed storage of vehicles on the roof. That would be the most recent set of drawings, even though they don't have vehicles on the roof.
Right.
And to see whether a mezzanine was allowed by then.
Right.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I just had a question. Could they clarify what this is being used for? Because the paperwork
Yeah.
said customer parking, but when you drive by, there's a lot of activity there, and that certainly is an awful lot of parking spaces for customers for the Nissan dealership. Like, I think they might be prepping cars here, so if they could just clarify it. And also, they say that they go back to the customer parking, but there are lifts inside.
Yeah.
So is this attended parking? I'm not, entirely sure what's going on here.
Unless those are areas where they're holding cars, where the customer may have brought for regular checks and repairs, and they're being held there, and then they're taken somewhere else.
Because it says
That's also possible.
there's 24 parking spaces. When I read that versus 131 car storage spaces. So I read that, not that I know the answer, but as there are 24 parking spaces for customers. Go park there when you want to take a look at one of our cars for, take a test drive. And then the cars upstairs are either cars that are kind of being ready for sale in some way. And so they bring them down and then they go to a place wherever that is, because they say they don't do service here.
Right.
They say they do service at another location on 75th Street. So maybe these cars are stored there, and then when the customer says, I want that car in blue, they have that car in blue right there in the storage. They drive it to the service place that shines it up or whatever you do, and then
I saw one of the vehicles in the parking lot that was coming out, had the dealer tag attached to the front window seal. So my feeling is inside is the dealer cars and outside is the customer parking. And sometimes this customer parking is also for if you're wanting your cars to, regular monthly checks and all, as you leave it there, then it goes to the place
Oh,
for
I didn't see that in
storage.
the paperwork, but,
Right,
If
so they
could
say
just
they don't.
address it, that would be
Right,
great.
yeah. No, it's not, it's really unclear. It's kind of, we
Was it-
store cars, whatever that means.
Was
Yeah.
there vehicles on the sidewalk when you did your site visits?
I know in the Google Street View there were
There is,
two.
right.
And I did see one, and that was a dealer car. That was
So we should say
on the
something about
sidewalk.
vehicles
Yeah.
being parked on the sidewalk.
Right.
I mean, just for the record, I do get my vehicles from the Copel, and that's how they do, that's how they operate. So their repair places are somewhere else, it's not
Right.
in that area.
Yeah, that's what they
Yeah.
say also. Okay,
Okay, move on.
yeah.
Item number 1149-12, BZ 3409 Francis Lewis Boulevard, Queens.
Okay, we approve of service of initial application and notice of hearing to officials, and photographs that there was notice mounted in the lobby for this gym. Community Board recommends approval. Fire Department issued a letter of no objection, and I don't have any other comment. Anybody else? No?
Appeals calendar, continued hearing items, item number 12, 2017-318A, 155 Johnson Street, Staten Island.
Right,
This
so-
case is requesting adjournment. That would be the third adjournment.
Yeah, third adjournment, so we should send them certified mail dismissal warning letter. Last time we heard this was October.
New cases, item number 13, 16714A, 250 Manhattan Avenue, Brooklyn.
There are no notice requirements for extensions of time to complete. They provided us with field reports, the last one of which was from February, so we should have an update as the projected completion in that February report was mid-August, but they by then were running a month behind schedule, so maybe they're still running more months behind schedule, so we should get an updated field report.
Based on my field visit, the bricks are up, the facade is up,
Right.
so some improvement is happening.
Yeah. So, but even from the photos from February, the walls were up, the facade was up, but a lot more goes into a building than the walls, right? So, yeah, and since they have a bank that's issuing payments, they do those field reports
Right.
every month.
Right.
So, okay.
Zoning calendar, continued hearing, item number 14, 5602BZ, 317 Day Hill Road, Brooklyn, and item number 15, 196BZ, 600 McDonald Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay, so the reason that we put this on for now is the last hearing was in April 9th, and that was before the city council had a chance to vote on the rezoning. So the council vote was on April 29th, so presumably it is now rezoned. So then, this isn't necessarily, doesn't have to be a discussion here, but it does need to be a procedural discussion about what do we do now, right? So now that that the zoning permits this banquet facility use in the district, there isn't any question that the use is not in compliance with the terms of our grant. And these were compliance hearings, right? So in order to amend their application, I think, they need to come to us with an application for an amendment. I don't know how we can do that with the compliance hearing. I don't know if we can do it with the compliance hearing, but that's something, again, it's a procedural discussion that we can figure out, okay?
Oh, okay.
What?
No, I'm
Say?
sorry, I thought
No, what did we just,
we had discussed the amendment. All right, never mind.
What
we
did-
did, that's the thing, so we didn't get an amendment filed, right? So, but we need to get rid of these cases. We have to either close them and conclude, obviously they're out of compliance, with a direction to do something, or what, right?
Okay.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
Is that a different recollection? Yeah.
I was wondering too, at this point, what happens to that part of the building on Day Hill with the school, but then what happens to the McDonald
Right.
Avenue one, because they still want to enlarge.
Well, we
That's a
told
separate
them
action.
to withdraw that application,
So
right?
they're going to withdraw it.
They withdrew the application to enlarge the building. This still floats here for some
Yeah,
reason
that's
as a
what I was wondering.
compliance hearing because of I don't know why it's still floating under the 4311 case, because that was earlier than when the original variance was granted, I
You
think.
mean the 5602?
Oh, I'm sorry, 56,
56 or
196, sorry, no,
Oh.
196. So it floats with the 196 because it's a compliance hearing on 196, right? So that's why this keeps coming here, but they did withdraw, and it's true that the description is wrong here. It should never have said amendment for extension, it should always say compliance hearing based on the 196 approval, the last time it was approved, way back. So, yeah, so some of the confusion is we see that description and it's not right. Okay? So, yeah. Okay.
Item number 16, 4311BZ, 1926 East 21st Street, Brooklyn. There is a request for an adjournment.
Correct.
Item number 17, 2017-56BZ, 1321 Richmond Road, Staten Island.
All right, the applicant's submission is the only one since January and holds to the 4-unit project. It includes structural drawings, but not geotech, which I believe we asked for at the last hearing, but I'll let Commissioner Sheta speak to that. It continues to show an enormous retaining wall wrapping the entire building, but I again defer to Commissioner Sheta as to whether that's a reasonable assumption. At a previous hearing, I believe he indicated concern over supporting serpentine rock with a standard retaining wall, but again, that's his specialty. I also defer to Commissioner Otley Brown for whether the 4-unit building is the only one that can make a reasonable return, since a 3-unit building could use the same floor area, since no waiver is being requested for that, for floor area. This district only permits 1-family homes, so we would be quadrupling the density with this waiver. Furthermore, as discussed at a much earlier hearing, there is no objection for density, and 4 units exceed the allowable unit per lot area requirement for an R12 under 23-22. On a 9,742 square foot lot, which this is, a maximum of 3 units would be permitted. And I have had personal experience with this issue where, on the one hand, you're asking for a use that's not permitted in the district, so there are no bulk regulations that regulate. However, the density regulations just apply to all buildings. That's the way it's phrased. And so DOB issues an objection for that because they don't say, well, we don't know what to do. The bulk regulations don't apply here, right? So you could get kicked back just because of how they read that one. There's a few places like that in the zoning resolution that seem to ride independent of what the bulk regulations are by use. The drawings don't indicate unit sizes, although the financial analysis states that they are each approximately 1,000 square foot 2 bedrooms. But if there were 3 units, each the size of the floor plate of the simplex 4th unit, 4th floor unit, there would be less cutting of the hillside. So construction costs would be reduced, plus fewer costs with internal stairs for duplexes, because they're making these 3 duplexes. It's always much more money to make a duplex, because for obvious reasons, and they could be doing 3 simplexes instead if we went to 3 units instead of 4. These are things I'm just kind of throwing out there. I also don't see calculations to determine the appropriate measurement for maximum front wall height of 25 feet above what's known as the front yard line. And then there's a sky exposure plane of 1:1. The sections show the 25 feet springing from 15 feet above the first floor level, but most of that front yard area is cut back to align with the sidewalk. So I don't understand why you're not measuring off the sidewalk line instead of off of the hill, because you're not building on top of the hill, you're building down at sidewalk level. So isn't what city planning means by measuring from the front yard line, measuring from what you perceive on the street? Because the building's very tall, because you're starting at 15 feet above grade. And you're starting at 15 feet above grade because the slope is going up, but the building is dropped down onto the sidewalk. So I'm not sure that that's correct measurement. And all these comments are going to the neighborhood character finding, which actually I don't see was ever addressed by the applicant in these materials. Okay, others?
So I'll start with bear with me, I have my notes. So I'll start with the uniqueness, and I think the applicant over the time has provided information about the uniqueness of the site, and I do agree that the subject site is unique, as the site slopes in all 4 directions, and it's unique from the other sites. Unlike the sites along Richmond Road on lot 89, 84, 81, 67, 300, 302, 305, 307, which are interior lots, were built between 1899 to 1920. Except for Lot 89, which has a commercial use, all the homes are located on a higher elevation and on flatter ground, as evidenced by documents submitted by the applicant on 2/24/2017, Exhibit 4B, Historic Topo Map of the area. It shows that the subject site is the only one where the ground is sloping in an angle to the front of the lot line and the slope is steep compared to its abutting lots, where the contours are running more parallel to the front lot line and becomes less steep and flattens out to the east and west. Newer developments along Richmond Road are cut into the site as evidenced on lots 98, 100, 102, 106, which were built together. Lots 77 and 73 have less steep slope condition than subject lot, 30% based on the BSA resolution provided for these two sites as part of the initial submission. BSA found in those cases that the topographical condition, adverse influence of adjacent commercial use on Richmond Road, vehicular traffic patterns and frequency, a one family would not be economically feasible, and lots 73 and 74 are the four sites, these are the four sites that are located 4 blocks from the subject site, 4 lots from the subject site. Lot 20 is an exception as it is a through lot and therefore it takes advantage of accessing from a higher elevation from Overlook Avenue and did not have to provide a retaining wall. It used concrete piers. Lot 62 and subject lots are located at an intersection of two roads. Unlike Lot 62, which is a corner lot and takes advantage of 2 frontages by orienting the building along Vista Avenue and accessing from a higher elevation than along Richmond Road at a lower elevation, the subject site is not a corner lot and has only access from one roadway, which is at a lower elevation. So the subject site has to address more slope condition than any of the other lots along this street frontage. With regards to the neighborhood context, the buildings located along the east side of Richmond Road are taller in appearance than those on the west side because the east side is at a higher grade on the flatter portion of the land, and not to mention homes fronting on Overlook that are visible above the Richmond Road homes. Based on the existing context, the proposed 3-story at-grade parking is not out of context. The massing of the newer buildings on lots 77, 73, 98, 100, 102, 106 rise 3 stories straight without distinctive setback or articulation of the street wall. The proposed project sets back above 2 stories and the massing is further articulated by not maintaining a continuous street wall. The frontmost street wall is 20 foot wide compared to the newer buildings built here or the ranch-style homes. This reduces the visual appearance of the building when compared to the existing buildings. No building is located at grade except for the abutting mixed-use commercial building on lot 89 along Richmond Road. All are either located over a buff, raised ground, or garage. The proposed building maintains similar height of the floor matching that of the abutting building. The only exception is that the proposed building is set closer to the front lot line compared to the others to minimize digging and to maintain a retaining wall of a height of 21 feet as compared to 1331, 1337, 134 Richmond Road, where the walls are the retaining walls are 22 feet plus 22 feet, so which is like 44 feet, which, as explained, was built together as with the 2 homes along Overlook. Now, per section 25-635,
Below Overlook. No?
along Overlook Avenue.
Oh. Oh,
The two, so these are 5 homes, 3 along Richmond and 2 along Overlook Avenue. They were all built together, and the retaining walls are, they go in steps. So 22, 22, it's a total of 44-foot-high retaining walls were provided, because they were built, it's like a through lot construction, which is very different from the subject site. And I want to point out one thing is that the 1331, 1337, 1343 Richmond Road was built prior to the addition of zoning resolution text 25635, which is the maximum driveway grade to the text and lower density growth management. So these lots maintain more than 11% slope compared to the proposed site where 11% is maintained for a 13-foot length compared to the 15% slope that has been maintained for the 3 buildings on Richmond Road that are already built. So the building is set closer also, and it is starting at a lower point. But, given all the heights of the buildings and the fact that they're at a higher ground level, I think the height of the building and the way the building has been formed in terms of the street wall makes it not as imposing as some of the other buildings. So those are my comments on uniqueness and neighborhood, and I really don't have any issue with this project unless there are other comments coming from Commissioner Otley Brown and Commissioner Shetta.
So I don't have any issues on the A finding. I don't have any issues on the B or the E as the project is designed at this moment in time. But I will then defer to Commissioner Shetta and, if necessary, come back to me.
Okay.
Sure. So regarding the uniqueness, I still believe that the site is not like dramatically unique from other adjacent sites. Yes, I understand there is like some steeper slope at the property. However, the adjacent properties, according to the contoural map submitted by the applicant, which I'm looking at right now, I still believe the slope at the subject property is still comparable to other sites within the zoning district. This is number one. Number two, I did ask previously for a detailed cost estimate, construction cost estimate, and I'm looking at the previous comments right now where I did ask 3 times before at least for details of the construction cost estimate that satisfies the requirements that we previously submitted. However, even with this submission, I did not get that. What I got this submission is, again, amounts, and these amounts were linked to items like concrete. Under the concrete, it lists shoring, excavation, retaining foundation walls, waterproofing, French drain, slabs. The amount is about $825,000. So how much is the shoring? How much is the excavation? How much is the retaining wall? I have no idea. It's just all of these items are just $825,000. Now let's put all this aside, and this is again like usual. This is a sincere advice. The retaining wall submitted with this project is the most massive retaining wall I ever seen within the past 30 years of my career. I never seen a retaining wall with a footing that's almost 30 feet wide and 5 feet thick. Never. I haven't seen this before. So this is number one. The height of the retaining wall is 33 feet of the tallest one. And if I'm the structural engineer, by the way, we did ask for a geotechnical report. We didn't get it like most of the cases, but let's say they don't want to spend money on the geotech report and that site is turpentine rock from grade to whatever. I'll buy this. If I'm the structural engineer and I'm not the geotech, and somebody's coming to me with a retaining wall that's 33 feet tall, like the first item I would think of is to talk to the architect and say, hey, can we take this 33 feet down a little bit? Or to whoever is designing the site plan, because 33 feet retaining wall, most likely it cannot be a cantilever retaining wall. Cantilever means it doesn't have something to tie it back, like a tie back or a ground anchor. So step one, talk to the architect and say, hey, can we play with the site plan? Can we relocate the building so we can reconfigure the excavation so the height of this retaining wall is not 33 feet? Take it down, because it's gonna be scary retaining wall. This is number one. Number two, and again, this is to the structural engineer. In your drawing, you're saying that the retaining wall will need to dig in. Let's say this is the rock face, the footing need to go underneath the rock mass about 5 feet. That means that you're gonna dig 5 feet into rock and you're gonna cut this to build the retaining wall. You're gonna cut this like a vertical face. It's gonna be exposed without, in order to construct the wall to protect the rock, to retain it, you have to make this rock unretained by cutting this. So this rock will stay unretained without any protection for a period of time. For the period of time, you need to form and cast this very massive retaining wall, which is not gonna be like poured overnight. At least every like 10 feet segment of this wall, probably it's gonna take like 2 weeks to put the rebar in place and to construct it. So if you, the structure engineer, understand that this rock face will be cut, this is gonna be like a very risky condition, extremely, let me put it like this. This is gonna be an extremely risky condition to whoever is right behind this rock mass.
What's going
If
on.
you have houses up there, all this is gonna be exposed, and most likely, like 99.99%, this rock mass will start moving because you're claiming it's serpentine rock. It's gonna start moving, and you're gonna see issues to the structure up top. So I'm not sure why a solution like this is adapted. Again, this is a sincere advice. I believe, based on my experience, the best solution, if you insist that the excavation need to be 33 feet, and you have to prove it to us why, be my guest. But I believe the best approach to retain this is to come before cutting anything, install piles by drilling, and then cut like 10 feet, put a whaler beam, and then put a tie back. So you retain the rock while you're going down. But you cannot cut all the way from the grade to 33 feet deep. And actually, it's not 30, they need to cut 33 plus the thickness of the footing. Actually, it's about 40 feet deep. So if your intention is to cut 40 feet deep in this rock mass, make it like an exposed vertical cut, and then put a retaining wall, and then this retaining wall will be cantilever. It's gaining its stability from just that weight of that retaining wall. I believe you need to look at the numbers. I really recommend that the structural engineer who designed this take a look at the numbers, see if I doubt that somebody designed this wall. By saying design, meaning he put the forces, he got the overturning moment, the stabilizing moment, the sliding force, and he made sure that this wall is not gonna slide, it's not gonna overturn, it's not gonna break. If the stem of the wall itself is not gonna break, and the stresses underneath the footing are within the tolerated limits of the building code. All these things need to be looked at. Designing a retaining wall like this is not a joke. And even, like I said in the beginning, it's not recommended. So I would go with another type of wall, tied back, shorter, significantly shorter than this. I don't know how, but the site engineer, the site civil engineer should think of a reconfiguration of this building and this site. And the option I'm talking about, the tied back one, is much cheaper because all what you need to do is possibly put like 18-inch diameter, not even tangent piles. Tangent piles are like one adjacent to each other like this. They are tangent. But because you have rock here, you could even leave a space between the piles, like put one that's 18-inch diameter and then leave like 6 inches and put another one and then 6 and so on. So you
This is
build
piles in
yes,
front
so you
of the
build
rock?
a wall of piles, and then the excavation sequence is this: dig 10 feet, then you're gonna have a cantilever pile wall that's 10 feet high. Put a steel beam or a concrete beam or whatever whaler, and then put tiebacks into the rock mass. So these tiebacks will hold this rock mass back, and then dig the next whatever, and then if needed, then put the second level of tiebacks and eliminate this really massive retaining wall. It's not the best solution, and I'm afraid that it's not gonna work. I need to look at the calculations, but I'm not gonna do it.
No.
And I'm urging the structural engineer to look at it. or
But we
consult the geotech.
had also resident neighbors who live above attending this hearing, a
They
couple of years, and that's exactly what they were.
I
afraid
saw,
of,
I saw
right.
some other site with another case that the building up top started to like play around and the landscaping, the walls. If this cut is done 40 feet deep, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna see something like a clone of the other case.
Okay. So,
That's a, while I found the last submission to be convincing with regard to hardship argument, what you're saying here is extremely concerning with regard to the very concerns that the residents nearby and what we heard testimony of, their fears. And I think that that needs to be looked into. I also I am expecting someone from the community group to attend. I remember the last date we received correspondence that they could not attend on January 8th. So I'm assuming they will attend, and that's certainly something that I'd like to hear their position on.
right. So, but, some of this is Commissioner Sheta's expertise, where he recognizes a danger, but he's not the design engineer for them, so that they need to respond to that, because BSA doesn't do engineering drawings, right? But I think some of this, for me, goes to the difficulty of working the site, where you're using it based on what you're saying, and that's what the drawings look like to me too. The engineer just said, oh, here's my standard stack of retaining wall drawings,
Thank you.
and I'll just put the number 33 feet, because that's what it says on the sections provided by the architect, and good to go,
And
right?
probably he cranked in some numbers to design the width, the thickness of the footing. I believe he did some sort of effort trying to design this wall, because if you look at the drawings, some of the sections, they don't have what we call it key. You have just the footing, and you don't have part of the footing penetrating into the rock underneath.
Right.
At the tallest section, he made this key, meaning that when you provide a key for a retaining wall, it's when it moves like this, and when you provide the key, that's what you do. You just make like a shear connection between that wall and the rock underneath, so it's not gonna slide. So I believe he cranked some number, but my concern is it didn't go to a geotech, and in my opinion, if that was the case, this resulted in two things. Number one, the geotech in his geotechnical report, usually the geotech provides a discussion about, okay, we have option A, option B, option C, and I believe option C works, then it's A, then it's D. So he arranged the options to the structural engineer to pick one of these options. And then it comes the landscape engineer who look at the options, then value them, then pick a site configuration based on the geotech options presented in his report. And at the final decision is the structural guy. I believe in this case, we've just gone to the structural folks, and they had no other option but to design a 33 feet tall retaining wall, and the result was 5 feet thick footing.
Wow, okay.
And the stem is, I believe it's 5 feet too, and it's really massive. And my concern, if it's just the mass of the retaining wall, I wouldn't care about that. I would even go with the cost, and let me be honest, the cost they submitted, for me, it doesn't scare me when considering the mass of the retaining wall. But what concerns me, really, like, it scares me. The idea is that these guys wanna cut 33 feet, then dig 5 feet for the footing, then probably another 5 feet for the key, and leave all this exposed during the course
Right.
of the construction. That's a concern.
Right, okay, so that's a different thing. So in other words, even without the breakdown of costs, which we talked about at the last hearing, the 800 something for this enormous retaining wall is believable. Is that what you're
It might
saying?
be believable for that kind of retaining
Right,
wall.
right.
Yes, but I don't think the approach is like
Should,
that.
right,
Yeah.
understood, okay, all right.
So as to answering your question about an E finding and minimal variance, if the construction costs stay as they are now, the project right now shows that there's only about a $47,000 profit after selling off. If you were to reduce it to 3 simplex units, the construction costs would probably go down because you have less fixtures and stuff like that, and you don't have the indoor staircases in each apartment. But it's possible that the sales prices could go up because they're going to be hopefully larger with more bedrooms. So I would need to see that. I would need to see the plans for that, and I would need to see a financial that shows the cost to make a smaller number of units, and then the sales price based on new comparables that match the new sizes of the units,
Right.
in order to make a determination as to whether or not you could make do with 3.
With 3, where the floor plate is like the 4th floor simplex unit, which is a smaller floor plate, hence less cutting of the mountain, right? So you would have maybe significant savings on that whole retaining wall subject, right? And then I go back to, I do believe we need another DOB objection if we were going to go to 4 units, right? So,
Madam Chair?
yeah.
I'm sorry, just procedurally on the DOB objection. Your question is an objection regarding density, or is there a use objection already in place?
There's already a use objection.
And that wouldn't encompass? the-
No, at my experience with DOB on this particular one is that whenever, or not just this one, I've had the experience with this particular provision with DOB, but also with some other ones where I was very surprised too, because well, wait a minute, use isn't even permitted. What are you talking about? And I think in my case, it was an even more extreme version of it. It was like going from, in a manufacturing district, putting in a residential building or something like that, and DOB said, no, but you have to comply with whatever it was, the density regulations, because that applies to all buildings. Or there's other ones, not just density. There are other ones that just say, all buildings shall, and the density regulations are actually written that way, so, because it doesn't say for 1 and 2 family homes, you do this. It has a breakdown for all the sizes of buildings, as opposed to saying in an R1 district or something, you shall, right?
Just very quickly, one
Yeah.
more like comment at glance. If you look at section 3.3 of the retaining wall,
The
it's on
most
page
recent
3.
submission?
Yes, page 3 of the PDF, section 3.3, the one to the left. If you look at the concrete block at the bottom, the 4 feet by 6 feet, that's what we call it shear key.
Sheer key?
It's a shear key. And the function of this guy is to tie the wall with the ground as a mess, so it's not gonna slide. Hey, Mr. Structural Engineer, this shear key should be reinforced. It shouldn't be plain concrete like that. So if you have plain concrete, most likely you don't need it, so eliminate it. If you need it, it need to be reinforced. This design need to be looked at. Yes, I understand, this is a small project, it's not a skyscraper, but sometimes small project worth to look at more than a skyscraper, and I believe this case is one of them. So this design need like a second eye to look at it, to value engineer it, and to reduce the cost of that.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thank you very much.
Item number 18, 2017-272BZ, 10-19 46th Road, Queens. This is a adjournment request.
Yeah.
Item number 19, 2017-273BC, 974 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, it's kind of a very frustrating case. Several of the instructions were ignored again. This time, the architect really has to come to receive the instructions directly. This kind of playing telephone isn't working at all. They need to provide current revision dates on the drawings, and then we'll go through what they did, what they didn't do, and, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Item number 20, 2017-309BZ, 406 Remsen Avenue, Brooklyn.
Okay.
So Ted went out on Friday?
Oh, he did, but I didn't see the photos
So
yet.
he uploaded some photo, I emailed everyone.
Okay.
He said dead vehicles in the front yard, a white Ford van and a blue tow truck. The owner stated they're his. 2 covered pallets of materials near 414 Renson. White fence or other equipment in the rear yard. No vehicles on the sidewalk. No propane, torches, or hot work in operation at the time of the visit. Observed electronic buffing machine in use. At Peter P. Auto, 408 Remsen Avenue. That's it, and then he puts some photographs. That's sort of brief notes, and he submitted
Okay.
some photographs. Apparently there's
What was in the rear yard?
some white fence and other equipment in the rear yard, and the photographs show a bunch of stuff in the rear
Okay,
yard.
but so we'll look at the photo.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So at our last hearing, which was on April 9th, that was our last hearing. We have an April 29th submission from a neighbor, so subsequent to that hearing, stating that as of that date, conditions had not changed and requesting deadlines for compliance. Also requesting elimination of certain curb cuts except for the one on East 58th Street to improve traffic patterns and allow for the safer bus stop usage, and to reduce cars parked reduce cars parked on the lot to the number 5. There still is apparently, okay.
If you keep scrolling, you'll see all
Okay,
this stuff. crap
okay,
that's back
okay.
there.
Thank you. So they're asking for a reduction of the amount of cars that are parked on the lot. There still is apparently parking on the sidewalk, according to that neighbor, on April 29th. And the neighbor is also okay with ivy and grass planted in the rear. I always like to fill up those areas with real stuff so you can't throw garbage in it, which you can do on grass and on ivy. Fire department should re-inspect, and as we noted, our compliance officer just went out on Friday, or Friday or today? Friday?
Friday.
Okay. The owner must attend the hearing, and so must his attorney. At the last hearing, he had requested an adjournment, so his attorney wasn't available, didn't know to come, and we didn't allow the adjournment, and so the owner came. The only submission we received from the owner, or from whoever, is a sketch of a sprinkler layout, which was prepared by an architect without any of the typical sprinkler notes and without any indication of compliance with codes. So it's not prepared by a sprinkler engineer. It's also only sprinklering for one building. And we discussed at the last hearing that that may not be adequate if there are issues with the fire ratings of the building's walls. And also, we don't know what the activities are really in those other buildings. And that was kind of it. So I don't consider that to be much progress. And I don't know how we get past this point, except that the architect, if that's who's doing the sprinkler drawings, has to file the plans and see what DOB and fire department says about them. And the architect has to indicate the proposed use on the drawings and ensure that the sprinklers are what's required for that use. So there was nothing that said, section of the code says this many sprinklers per square foot or whatever for this type of use or this type of sprinkler system. So it's basically, I used to do these drawings too without knowing how to do sprinkler drawings. So I understand why that looks like that, but that's not really the instruction. And we know that the owner is saying that it's hard to afford to make these changes, but that's his obligation of the owner of a non-conforming use. So that's a nuisance in the neighborhood, and we explained it. Okay, anybody else on this? No. Okay.
Item number 21, 2018-33BZ, 3141 97th Street, Queens.
The last hearing was adjourned, but we did discuss our comments at the review session. The materials had to be revised to respond to concerns about compliance with the zoning resolution. This submission includes very detailed zoning analyses as requested. However, I didn't see compliance with the planting requirement of section 23-451 that requires 20% of the frontage of a 20-foot wide lot be planted. That goes to the issue of side yards and the width of the proposed full lot width building. And the planting beds are typical of the area, so to ask for a waiver of planting beds, I think goes far beyond what's reasonable of a variance. We need to be clear in our resolution, if the board should decide to approve something, some kind of waiver on the site, that no waivers for floor area, balconies, front or rear yards, or height and setback are included. So DOB has to accept the floor area at the second floor, only part of which is under a sloping roof. I mean, they have to review it and determine whether it's acceptable. So we are only waiving minimum lot area and side yards. That's the only waiver that I think is appropriate for the hardship complained of. Sometimes on these applications, we observe that the building width could be 17 feet to allow for a 3-foot side yard. The proposal here is 20 feet lot line to lot line. I don't think we have anything in the record to establish why the 20-foot wide house is the minimum variance, other than a statement from the applicant's representative that the owner doesn't want a narrower house. But 17-foot wide houses are common. A house that's built lot line to lot line doesn't allow for access to the rear without trespassing, essentially. And, may arguably is typical of the neighborhood, but then the issue of the front yard planting, because like the entire front yard is a parking lot, right? So it's parking and a staircase. So you could accomplish that by not having the entire thing be a parking lot and a staircase. So, anyhow. Any other comments on this? No?
States in compliance with the front yard.
Item number 22, 2018-39BZ, 1249 East 23rd Street, Brooklyn.
Most of the requested corrections were made. The submitted site plan shows adjacent houses set back 23 feet and 25 feet from the rear yard. Hence, the second floor of the proposed should also be set back to a minimum of 23 feet. At the last hearing, I directed the applicant to provide us with more information on rear yards and to actually measure the depth of the adjoining rear yards and to provide actual heights of rear yard incursions for the adjoining properties. This is, we didn't get any kind of individual submission on that, but this information is apparently represented on the site plan, so, which indicates that the adjoining properties have setbacks of 23 and 25 feet. So that's inconsistent with statements generally made in the cover letter without supporting documentation. So as far as I can see from the architect's own drawings, those are the depths of the adjoining properties, and that's what I go by because that's the architect's drawings.
I don't know, maybe I misread the drawings, but with regards to the rear yard, the rear yard drawings show that 66% of the buildings on the block have rear yards less than 30 feet, and the abutting rear yards are 20 feet, and they are 2 stories. So 20 feet, 2 stories on lot 26, 23 feet rear yard for a 2-story building on lot 22. And in the rear on lot 66, it has a 20-foot rear yard, again, 2 stories. So, so these are basically rear yards that go straight up for 2 stories. At least that's, I was looking at the plan and I was looking at the aerial view and the photographs that the applicant had taken to kind of get that bearing.
Less than 20 feet, no.
No, I said the abutting rear yard is 20 feet, which is 20 feet maintained for two-story height on lot 26. The other abutting rear yard is 23 feet, which is maintained for 2 stories on lot 22. And on lot 66, it has a 20-foot rear yard also
Okay, so
So
the
that's what I
difference
was-
is those projects weren't built, those were approved at that. So the architect's drawings are showing the existing conditions.
Okay.
That's the way I'm understanding it. But again,
pull up the-
that was for the applicant to demonstrate, and I asked for specifics. Measure those rear yards, actually go with a tape measure and measure, that's how it's done. Or use a laser measurer, which are pretty fabulous. And then also tell us the heights. So the architect's drawings show the building setback 23 feet and then says that they're 2.5 stories or something like that. But the drawings on the architect's drawings are showing the setback that far. So again, this is like the case for the applicant to make. And we just didn't get a submission other than a cover letter that says so. So, but that's not the same thing as
No, I
data.
actually looked at the rear yard map.
The studies.
The study, and
Yeah.
then I compared it to photographs and the Google Street View. So I was using those to kind of
Right.
make that observation. It was not based on anything that the applicant had written.
Right.
I was just,
Yeah,
so I think those are already built conditions immediately around.
no, because the rear yard map is not a build condition. The rear yard map is the Sanborn, or maybe it is a build condition, I just don't know what the date of the Sanborn is, right? It shows that those were 20-foot rear yards that were approved by this board in X date, whenever that was, but apparently not built. Or if it was built, then there's no documentation to indicate that it was built.
Right, and what I'm saying is, I was more concerned about whether, A, they were built, and what was the height of it. And
Right, me
And
too.
that's when I looked at the Google aerial view. And that's how I
Okay.
made that statement.
Okay.
So
Okay.
maybe the drawing is not up to date to the Google Street
Okay.
View.
So I would just say, I mean,
Then
the
maybe-
applicant, this particular applicant knows how to provide that information and should provide it, and was asked to provide it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Item number 23, 2018-53BZ, 104 DeGraw Street, Brooklyn.
Okay. Sorry. Okay. This is our third hearing on this, where the applicant has been challenged with persuading the majority of the board, at least as of the last hearing, that there's an A finding. Additional materials were provided to do that. Although I actually frankly find it strange that the cover letter doesn't attempt to assemble the arguments into a single thought and asks us to do it on our own. It just says attach, please find kind of thing, which I don't understand that. Especially when applicants are lawyers, their job is to make an argument. Why are they handing us the stuff and saying, go see if we made an argument? The letter from the real estate broker largely makes a market argument that considers the location of the site in the specific neighborhood. I'm sort of struggling with the difference between what's unique versus what's particular to a neighborhood. So what I mostly got out of the letter was that the allowable floor area is too low for a viable commercial use. That was one. And also that in some situations, a 3,500 square foot floor plate isn't adequate, that you really need 5,000. But other than the statement from the real estate agent, I didn't find actual backup on that. It was just a statement that 5,000 would be this kind of the minimum that would work for a lot of these uses. The illustrative floor plans, though, that show various office spaces laid out in a building built full to the lot line, actually shows, because a lot of them, I look at it as an architect who owned a business with about this many employees and that kind of thing, and I look at it, I'm like, wow, this would be an amazing architect's office. So it didn't, what Commissioner Otley Brown had directed the applicant to do, which is one reason why it's confusing to have attached drawings and not told you why they attached the drawings, Commissioner Otley Brown had said, look, when we have other cases, you give us a drawing that shows that the staircase and the elevator or whatever take up too much space, and therefore the floor plate just doesn't work. And so these instead were 3 examples of pretty cool-looking offices and no explanation for why that's not fine. So I definitely needed more on that. And then there's a letter from an engineer discussing the need for and quantity of helical piles, and another discussing remediation costs. Neither of those costs were suggested as driving the hardships, however. The structural engineer's letter doesn't address the reason for not providing a cellar where the building that existed on the site had a cellar, as do the neighbors. This was discussed at length by Commissioner Sheta at the last hearing, and so there was no response to that. So I'm still struggling, actually, with the uniqueness finding, and also with that distinction between location versus the size of the lot, whether the 35. So we often look at cases where we say, all right, there's lots of 35-foot lots in the neighborhood, but only this one or only these many are vacant. And the vacant lot is presented with a different set of problems than the ones that are built, right? So maybe that argument needs to be reinforced further. Like what's so different here about this vacant 35-foot lot versus building? You know, I can't look at one with a building on it. They got to build when it was okay to have, say, 2 stories in the manufacturing district, whatever it was, or residential, et cetera. Okay, so.
To me, I actually found the information that they provided on the A finding to be more persuasive. And that's because I then looked back at the radius map and the uniqueness study as I was reading through the other cases that they provided. So in my brain, I wanted to know, are there other situations where we have allowed a uniqueness finding to be based on narrowness of lot that is a lot perhaps as wide as 35 feet? And in looking at the information they gave us 2 other cases that they found. One had a width of about 95 to 100 feet, and the other one had a width of 48 feet, but was located in a split lot situation. So both of those lots talked about the narrowness of the street and the being situated between residential uses, and how that actually restricted their development ability for an as-of-right industrial use. So I was like, okay, they're showing us parameters that we are within what the board would consider as a uniqueness finding. But then they also previously talked about, and we discussed this at length in the hearing, the fact that a few doors down there was a variance for a lot that was 2 tax lots put together into one zoning lot for 35 feet wide, and they had the same claims of being too narrow for a conforming use on that site. And so I find it very hard to actually distinguish this lot from that lot. And so the combination of that situation, as well as the other 2 cases they provided, as well as me relooking at the radius map and seeing that conforming use in this area is on lots that are much larger than this, or lots that are actually put together into assemblages, made me think that they had met the threshold of the A finding. Now, that being said, the real estate broker's letter spoke to me not so much for the A finding, but spoke to me about the B finding. And it was a justification for their rental prices to establish the B finding, that a conforming use would not be feasible on this site, for the very reasons of the isolated nature of this assemblage here in an area that historically has been a mixed-use area full of a lot of residential townhouses that served the nearby dock work that needed to be done. And also the fact that this was in an isolated geographic area that really wasn't by any public transportation. So I thought that broker's letter actually gave us a historical look at feasibility for real estate development in this area. So I found that that was actually really good to me because it provided the backup for their very low office and manufacturing rents. And so I was able to accept that they had established the B finding, given that backup. And I considered the real estate broker to be a professional
Yeah,
who
for
was
sure.
most probably credible. They don't have any skin in this game,
Right.
so to speak. So, yes, you're right. Sometimes it's hard to tell what is an A finding versus a B finding because they are so interlinked, and we don't want everybody to walk in and make a B finding and substitute it for an A finding. However, when you look at the radius map here, it's hard to find another lot that's similarly situated within their 400-foot radius and even further out than that. Part of the reason is because once you hit Columbia Street, you're in a residential area. So residential is available as of right. And then if you go west, past Van Brunt Street, you have government-owned dock land. And so it's not likely that that's going to be developed privately ever in the future. So that's why I feel that they've met the A finding. I think that it is unique if you're 35 feet wide and you're surrounded by residential, it makes it, and you're surrounded by legal residential, it makes it difficult for you to have an industrial use because of noise, noxious odors, and those sort of things. Kind of pushes you to enclose that use. So then when you look at the broker's letter, which talks about, well, you could probably use this lot for parking, but it would be preferable to have it in a structure. Well, if you have it in a structure, you need to have parking space, but you need maneuverability, and 35 feet wide doesn't give you that. You would have to have diagonal stalls in order to make use of like an 8-foot drive aisle, or if you had 90-degree perpendicular stalls to the sidewalls, you would not be able to store very large cars to have an access. So I was able to buy that. They then go on in their B finding to talk about how, yes, you could have an office here. And this is where you kind of get that kind of gray area between the A and the B, because you could lay out an office, and they show architecturally, yes, you can lay out the office. However, given the office market in Brooklyn and the fact that most of the office development right now is in downtown Brooklyn, and there's so much space coming online, there's so much to choose from, who in the world, given the choice, would choose to be here where it would take a private car to get here every day? Because there's, your workers are not going to be able to take the train unless they take the train and then take a bus, or take the train and then take a bicycle. It's hard to get to.
So then they would lower the rents.
They would lower the rent.
You would do it because the rents are lower than the market, standard market.
Right, exactly. And so what they're saying is the rents that they put into their report are actually generous rents, and that they probably wouldn't even get that much because there's just too much competition out there right now. Then they go to talk about, well, what about if we put retail here? And the type of retail that's in this area is very local mom pop retail that actually serves the people who live here. Nobody is coming from outside of the area to shop here because there isn't any large anchor stores that are making this a new retail area, and there's no space to put one because the area where you might think you would want one is government-owned land and not likely to be turned over. So that being said, I felt that made the B finding for me. So I also felt the character, I didn't have a problem with the character. I think that what they're proposing actually will fit in with the character nicely. I still have an issue with E.
Okay.
So would you like me to go into my issue with
Of
E
course.
at this point in time?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Okay, so my issue with E really centers around the residential rents that are being assumed for this property. There's been a lot of pushback back and forth because I've gone online and I've seen that apartments have actually rented for higher than what they've assumed. And so while they did budge a little, their initial rental was somewhere around $7,000 a month for the partial townhouse that's devoted to residential. And they did say to me, well, one of your comps has since been, reduced several times because they can't get the rent of $14,000. to me, when I took their comparables that they used to justify their now $8,000 a month rent, I noticed that all but 2 of those comparables are much smaller. And so, yes, they rent for less than the 10,000 and less than the 14,000 that we originally saw. But they're also half the size of what's proposed here. There are only 2 rentals that are on their list that are even approaching the 3,400 square feet of the proposed apartment. And one of them rents for $7,000 a month, and the other one is asking $10,000 a month. That shows me that 8,000 is still falling on the low edge of that rental range. And of course, then I went back on Street Easy, and I found that 2 doors down at DeGraw, the previous variance site, has a townhouse due to BSA grant that is about 3,400 square feet, similar to the apartment here, that's actually asking $14,000 a month for the entire townhouse. So, while the applicant can argue, well, that's an entire building devoted solely to the residents and the layout is superior, number one, the layout is inferior in the project because you chose to have an office building that was laid out the way it is. So you can't use that argument with me there. As for it being the sole use within the building, well, it is your choice to have office laid out. So I find it hard to accept that as well. However, I do know that if people are looking to rent something, they're more likely, if they're not tied into the commercial activity on the first floor, are more likely to opt for the townhouse, which is sole tenant.
Right.
Is that worth deducting the 14,000 asking to roughly half at 8,000? I think not.
Right.
And so, for me, this is a minimal variance issue because I don't know where the math is going to fall out. It may justify reducing the size of that residence a little bit or reducing the size of the commercial unit, but they need to show me an estimated rent that comes closer to the middle or high end of the range that I just established by looking at what I feel is appropriate based on their comps and what I saw on the internet.
Where is that townhouse?
They're just down the street.
It's
just
like
one,
6 doors down, maybe,
Yeah.
5 doors down.
So the BSA had approved 2 buildings.
it's not even 5 doors, it's literally
Oh,
2 doors
Yeah,
down.
like a couple of doors
Two down.
down.
And that's 14.
Similar design
And it's
concept.
similar in that, well, it's 2 apartments instead of this one. It's 2 townhouses, but one of the townhouses is asking 14,000. So for a 17-foot wide, townhouse situation versus this, which is residential, of course, the 35 feet.
Right, which is
but
a-
sitting on top of commercial office.
But, and you could also, because a 17-foot wide structure versus 35-foot wide structure is a whole other kind of fabulous space, frankly. I mean, 35 feet is wide relative to this type of a use,
Yeah.
right? So what you've got is something that's almost an abnormally large loft. So and I can see why you would subdivide the use because it's an abnormally wide loft. So the idea of having the entire almost 2 FAR building be residential is a lot, right? Hence this idea of having like work-live, or live-work, I think is actually a fabulous one-person use, and that's how it will be marketed. And you can see from the office layout, for example, that there be the architect's office, not that an architect necessarily could afford this building, but that you would have an architect or a creative's office on the ground floor, and then they would live above, which is, so it would make it a very desirable purchase and a very creative. I think the solution is extremely creative in terms of the design of the project, so much more interesting than a standard 17-foot wide townhouse. So.
Well, I would say I agree with you there, but if what they really are trying to do is market this as a joint project, maybe they need to look at a sales price on the entire development rather than a rent. Because if it is going to that particular architect or, I don't know, whoever, or artist who may want to have the retail on the first floor and the living area upstairs, It's probably going to be sold and not rented. If you're renting it, I think you're more considering the possibility that you're going to have two independent uses there.
Right.
And so in that case, I think it will show a different look. And it might be that what it would sell for and what's the ceiling of sales in the area might come closer to what the development costs are, and they might be able to establish a minimum variance without making any changes to the layout, but just showing that in this area, 3,400 square feet of living area plus, I don't know, what is it for office? Is it 1,700 square feet of office? The ceiling that you could get, given that you're in this area based on comps, is like 4 million or 3.5 million or whatever, and it's not that much higher than the development cost. There
That
might
would
be a
be
way
much
to provide
easier,
it.
right.
Yeah, to provide that minimal variance there.
So, and some of this is also, some developers retain ownership, that's just their business model, and other developers always sell off right away, right? I don't know what the approach of this particular developer is. We did see, though, I was looking at my notes, that there was testimony provided from area property owners who are obviously developers on the block and on the surrounding blocks, and so they're definitely the type that buy, develop, and keep, because in one case, one of them owned like 9 of the buildings on the block. So these guys may be the same.
Right, and if
Yeah.
they are that, and that's what they're intending, then I think they need to raise that rent on the residential portion, more towards the middle, towards the high end. They don't have to be at 14,000 square feet, because they can easily make the argument that you're not going to pay $14,000 a month to share space with somebody who may not be related to you, when you could go 2 doors down and have, maybe it's narrower, but it's entirely yours.
Yeah.
You don't have to share with anybody. So I would buy that argument to be not at 14,000, but I don't think you're at 8,000.
Right, okay. Anybody else? Oh, yeah.
I completely agree with Commissioner Otley Brown. I thought the Danmark's real estate broker's letter was extremely informative for me. I found the history of the neighborhood and how it changed from a predominantly a residential working class housing to kind of a hodgepodge of housing and some commercial and manufacturing spaces. And the BSA resolutions were very helpful in my understanding of how we have allowed for sites that are wider than 35 to be considered a hardship issue in this case. And as I had iterated before, I mean, this neighborhood, it is not a typical of the, like, not the Red Hooks and not the others. It's a very tight area which is hemmed in by all the ports services, and the other one is the BQE. The BQE really physically separates this building, this neighborhood out. So the even pedestrian circulation from the other side of BQE to this is kind of encumbered because you don't have that much of streets cutting through and making that connection. So it does not become an ideal location, though maybe close to the waterfront, and not an ideal location for a nice restaurant or anything type of use. So I'm totally convinced with the findings of A, B, C, and D, and the E finding. I also had a question as to why the applicant did not provide the status on 94 DeGraw or 98 and 96 DeGraw, and that is again the same price points that Commissioner Otley Brown was talking about. Based on what I saw on the website, 94 DeGraw is 2,835 square foot, sales price listed as 2.5 million, and 98, 96 DeGraw is 3,412 square feet, sales price being 3.9 million. And of course, these are for sale. Why something was not equated to that and use that for price comparison. So
What's the 96 listing? 96 DeGraw?
98 and 96 DeGraw, those are the two,
Yeah, yeah.
3.9 million, and the square footage for each is 3,412 square feet.
Okay.
So that was one of the
And
questions.
96 is listed on Street Easy for rental.
Oh, 96 is listed as rental?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that could argue
Okay.
for why it might not be selling, so they chose
Got
to
it.
rent it instead, but it's listed for asking for 14,000 a month.
But can you tell on terms of the sales listing, how long it's been for sale? Because if it sits in the market a long time, then it's an indication it's too high.
Street easy.
It tells you, but you didn't note that?
No, I did
Okay,
that, I didn't
okay,
note, I'm
okay.
sorry. Yeah.
Sometimes that indicates that if it's been on the market a year, there's a problem, that the asking is too high.
Yeah, no, I didn't.
Right.
That's easy to
Right.
check.
Yeah. Okay. Other comments?
Yes, I do have a totally different look into this. I believe this is one of the sites, and again, in a neighborhood, that if we let this go, tomorrow it's gonna be another site, and the day after it's gonna be another site, and so on. And again, we're gonna be accused of rezoning part of the city. I don't see like too much difference between this site and other 10 properties within 500 feet radius. 10 properties, they are almost more or less the same width. So I'm not sure why this is so different.
But did you look at the uniqueness study to see which ones of them are actually co-owned?
Yeah.
Because a lot of
There are
them
a lot of
are.
them are.
Because there are more conditions
Yeah.
than just the size alone.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
believe that's the argument that they were making. I think it's a creative argument. I wish it was more tied in on this particular,
Which I think they had made in the initial
Let-
submission.
let him
so-
just
I
finish
believe,
the
I agree
sentence.
that they did make it initially. I wish, and that this submission was responsive to all those, the confluence of conditions. I wish it was tied up again in something rather than, as the chair said, we had to put it together. But, so I don't, I'm not sure what kind of pathway we're opening to other applicants because these conditions are unique. It's not just the size. It's
The ownership condition, you're saying?
correct.
Yes, I totally understand this. But even if you pass the uniqueness part, which is the A finding, and you go to the B finding, the imposed hardship, I still see difference between the cost claimed and the cost I believe it should be on the order of 300 to 400,000. This is apart from the soft cost, which was claimed at, I believe, $320,000 to $600,000 for the proposed. As of right, it's 320. The proposed is 600,000. And I don't think this is a very complicated construction to claim that amount on the soft cost side. In addition to this, I did ask questions last hearing, and I got no answer to these questions. It's like I'm saying, what color is this? And somebody's answering me, it's 6 o'clock. That's exactly what I got, this submission. I did ask why the piling cost is 160,000 to 200,000. And the response I got from the engineer is, you know what, the minimum spacing per the New York City building code is this. I'm not asking you, why wouldn't you use more piles? I didn't ask this type of question. I didn't ask, add more piles, and then you're responding to me, you know what, I am at the minimum spacing, I cannot add any more piles. I didn't ask this. I did ask why the piles wouldn't be less. And I believe
Less in cost.
less in number and consequently in cost. These are helical piles. And a helical pile costs $2,500 to $3,000. Again, the way I do it is I take this building, get the total weight for it, divided by the capacity of one pile, which is about 25 to 30 tons. And I look at the number of piles, and fortunately for this case, it's a wall footing, so there is no waste. If you recall a case, we were talking about the efficiency of using piles. Sometimes you calculate the number of piles. You have like a spread pile caps, and you need 3.1 piles. So you can't use 3.1, you just use 4. But in this case, it's not a spread pile cap, it's a continuous wall. So the efficiency here is more or less 100%. And I looked at the number of piles, and it's apparently 60% of what is being used. And that's why last time, I didn't want to like shock people saying, I looked at the number of piles, it shouldn't be this, it should be 60%. I said, please give me feedback on why the piles need to be at the cost submitted. And again, the explanation I got is the New York City Building Code called for minimum spacing of this, and then the explanation continues. And this explanation is exactly similar to it's 6 o'clock answering what color is this.
Right.
So I'm not taking that.
It's
How
sort
much
of the
you think
wrong
it's-
person answering the question. The engineer may not know costs. The costing should have come from another source.
No, but that,
Yeah.
my point was, why do we need these many piles?
Right.
What do you
and
think-
I said, give me explanation, why do you need, he provided a pile plan, a plan,
right.
foundation plan, and I looked at the pile plan, and I looked at the number of piles. And I believe that the number of piles is more than what it should. And that's why I asked this question last hearing and the hearing before. And I didn't get an answer to that.
I thought his answer was, it's this many piles as opposed to the cost for the piles. I thought his answer was, it's this many piles because I calculate the number of piles based on whatever the building code
The
says.
spacing,
The
yes.
spacing, right?
Yes.
So that was accounting for, maybe he didn't say how, I forget whether he said how many that adds up to, but he explains that I do the spacing based on this information, and
Yeah.
I'm holding up the walls, and the walls are the same height and as of right versus more or less.
Let me, you
Yeah.
see this wall?
Yeah,
Somebody is claiming that I want to put 10 piles for it. So I'm going to use 10 piles. Let's say it's 10 feet. So a pile to, or 20 feet. A pile to pile is 2 feet.
right.
So, and I came and said, oh, I don't like 10 feet. Why don't you use 10, 20? Add 10 more. And he would say, oh, the minimum spacing between piles per the building code is 2 feet. I cannot go less. Minimum spacing means you want to increase the piles, so you shorten the distance
Right.
between the piles.
Right,
And he's saying, no, the minimum spacing this, I cannot add more than these piles, 10 piles. But
Okay.
this is not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for less piles, eliminating
He
piles.
wants the maximum space between
Exactly.
piles.
okay.
By asking to reduce the number of piles, I'm going towards the maximum spacing, not the minimum spacing. And there is no maximum spacing.
Okay.
If you need 1 pile, use 1 pile. If you need 6 piles, use 6 piles. But if you need 50, and I calculated the number, it's between 45 and 55. If you need that, do not use 80 or 100. That was the first point I made last hearing. The second point was, and I did raise this, and I was skeptical about it, because on the plan submitted, it was adjacent building with cellar. And then in the next
Right.
submission, was cellar was taken off,
yeah.
but the survey is still showing with cellar. So I asked, do we have cellar or we do not?
Right.
And if we do, can you provide explanations on why you cannot have cellars? That could have been done very simple. We looked at this option, that's what we did. It's not feasible, it's not gonna help. And I could have bought this, but ignored. No word on that. So, and the details on the cost, nothing submitted on that. It's just quantity and cost. What are the details on that cost calculation? Nothing. And soft cost, 300 to 600 for a building like this, it's like a small townhouse. It's not that complicated. Why do you need 600,000 on the proposed to engineer a building like this? Yes, I understand it's not just to engineer, it's to engineer plus, but
Right.
it's excessive. 600 is too much. So even if you pass on the uniqueness part, I believe that minimum variance
Is inflated.
is not there yet, and that's my concern. In addition to, like I said, I hate the idea of being like rezoning
Yes.
portions of the city. So,
How much do you think that the cost? is
Well, I just want to make sure
inflated?
that Commissioner Sheta is finished with his statement.
yes,
Yeah.
the reduction of the cost, I believe, on the hard cost, it could be on the order of 400,000
For the as of right?
for the proposed. For the as-of-right office, it could be 300 to 350, and I said that during the last hearing. I said the reduction in the hard cost could be 3 to 350, 300 to 350,000 on the as of right office. And that's why last time I was skeptical. This option could fly. It could be feasible. And if you add to this the adaptation of the seller idea plus the reduction in the soft cost, it might work. And we might not need to grant a variance at all.
It might work, except for, this is where they provided that backup information from the broker's letter, which I found informative, which is it's not likely to be rented. That's the issue. On paper, it looks like it can work because of the drawings, but the location of this site, it is not likely to ever be rented. And so you're faced with building something that, you know, it's not a build it and they will come, unless it's going to be so reduced in a per square foot basis, the value that you're going to get after capitalizing isn't even going to meet your reduced construction costs. So it's kind of like building a community facility from spec, not by a hospital. What are the chances of it actually being occupied?
So this is something I really want the applicant to respond to, because these are the parts where we travel very closely between, there's the unique physical condition about the site, and then the one where I read these resolutions that talk about how the combination of the issues creates the hardship, but that's the one I personally have a lot of trouble with, that everyone on the street is on a narrow street. Everybody on the street over there is on a narrow street, on the street over there. All the streets are narrow. So that's something that's generally experienced by everybody, right? And the same thing about being in a neighborhood that's away from the subway. So it's kind of like, what I don't want to do is be opening up a door that says 100 by 100 lot, gorgeous lot, right? In a neighborhood that's far from the subway won't work because it's far from the subway, and the market now, even for, let's just say, for anything, for manufacturing, for housing, for anything, requires that you be near the subway, which we know not to be the case because lots of people live not near the subway. So that's something that's generally experienced by the site versus by the neighborhood versus what's specifically experienced by this site. So for me, the clearest is it's 35 feet wide, and there are no other vacant lots that are 35 feet wide that are not held in common ownership. And when we see them held in common ownership with conforming uses, they're being used for parking, and then the other building on the lot is whatever it is that's commercial in nature. And then the other one is, here's 35-foot wide lots or even wider, and they're all residential. So that one is differently situated than this one. So then you look at, if you built this as of right thing, is the floor, this is going back to what Commissioner Otley Brown had requested at the last, make an argument about why a 35-foot wide conforming use is too narrow. And the broker started, but then didn't give us any backup. This broker said, really, you need 5,000 square feet in order for this to be viable at all, right? But he didn't explain why. And it seems like maybe the broker should be the one who comes to the hearing tomorrow.
This is a trend in providing answers to the board, to critical board wishes.
Yes.
It's more or less the same as when I asked last hearing, why do you have 90 grand for remediation? And not an environmental engineer, a real estate professional responded to us saying, we developed some other properties.
Right, and we had to do that.
It's based on my experience. Are you serious? Based on your experience in environmental engineering, you believe that you need 90 grand to clean up this site? Do we have any contamination at all? This is not 10,000 that you're throwing away for a tank removal. You're talking about $90,000 in the cost here, which is, the cost equation here is not that, we're not talking about $10 million for the cost. We're talking about significantly less numbers, and you're coming with almost with 100 grand to put in the equation just because you believe that you need them. You know what? I don't believe you need them.
Well, okay, that's a
All right,
question.
but now,
Yeah, yeah.
now here's where, at some point, we have to get from second guessing every single line item here and look at the overall picture. And
Yeah.
if the overall picture shows construction costs that are not elevated here, then maybe we should just let this go. Because we're talking about construction costs on the order of about $275 a square foot, which isn't that high in this day and age in Brooklyn. And I think that one way you could put this to bed without costing them an awful lot of money and having them run around and round is to have them do a quick and dirty Marshall and Swift analysis showing what the cost to construct an office building in Brooklyn, given the multipliers that you would need because you're in the city and the elevation and the construction costs, it's all built in to a price per square foot and see where that leads us. And then you can allow only that. I'm sure it'll come in somewhere close to the 274.
Okay, so, because the point here, there is, even if there's too many helical piles, or there aren't, or it shouldn't be $3,000 a helical pile, or whatever it is they're saying. But if the total cost per square foot is in line with construction costs in the city,
I hear that.
like, whatever, so when they finally get their cost estimate, when they finally get their proposal from a contractor, helical piles won't cost as much, but something else will cost more, and that'll end up with your 275, right? And that's what you're saying. Like, it'd be different if the cost per square foot was coming out at $500, which sounds like completely off the wall for this type of use. I mean, it's not a high-end townhouse with high-end finishes, and it shouldn't be anyway, because this is a variance, so then you're instead looking at standard office construction to deliver a plain vanilla box, kind of, to an office or a manufacturing user.
And
Yeah.
I make this suggestion really because this is a small project.
Yeah.
And there is only so much extra money that this person probably has to keep chasing all of these different reports. And it's a small project. This is
Right.
not a 30-story office building in, the middle of Manhattan.
Right. Well, so this is only the third hearing where everyone had problems with the A findings for the first two, everyone. But the other thing about it is that sort of the reality of development. If you're proposing to develop a site, you hire an engineer. You have them. You're already costing out with a construction company, or you have an in-house, depending on who the developer is, you have an in-house cost estimator. All those things already exist in a development team, so the idea that we're necessarily asking for information that they're not going to need anyway, they need a geotech, or at least a structural engineer.
They provide
Right.
geotech.
Right, but in this case, unlike others, those helical piles are not part of their A finding.
No, they're not.
So that's why I'm saying, if they want to do helical piles and the cost to construct using them is not out of line with what the generally
Yes.
accepted norm is in this area, let's just accept it.
Yes.
Now,
Right.
if they were saying, this site is unique because we have to use helical piles here,
Right.
and it's a premium cost of $600,000, then I could see, all right, give us all of these reports and statements that justify this uniqueness finding. But that's not their uniqueness, nor is the site cleanup, environmental remediation. That comes under the
Right.
general construction costs. So show us an industry-accepted publication, Marshall and Swift, industry-accepted and used, and what they would say it is to construct a property at this site. And there you just go with,
$275.
your square footage and, your locational adjustments, your height adjustments, all the different adjustments you're allowed to add on for constructing in New York City, boroughs versus Manhattan, whatever, and let's see what you come up with. And if it comes up with the ballpark figure that they're using, let's let it go. If it doesn't, then I can then argue that you have a point. We need to trim these construction costs because not even industry-accepted guidelines are suggesting this kind of construction cost. But if they are, then do we really care if they use 20 or 22 piles or piles versus
we do not.
footings
We
or
do not.
whatever? That's what I'm saying.
I agree, we do not care whether it's 50 pile or 100 pile. My only concern on these numbers was because they are related to the B finding. They are
Yes.
in the equation of cost minus income, and this is the how you like judge a variance like this, whether it's a minimum variance or not. I'm not saying they are claiming that the piles, the remediation is imposing hardship to this specific site. I'm not suggesting that.
Right.
But I don't have the other option to look at it. If they have submitted what you just discussed, this submission, and instead of this lengthy engineer letter that gave me no answer to my concerns, I could have taken it and just closed this and let it go. But I didn't do
Right.
it.
So, you know what I think this is kind of boiling down to, because often we ask very specific questions, we don't get the answers. And when we get a cover letter that says attached please find, and we don't actually know what we're supposed to look at with those things, this goes to the applicant's, the owner's rep, not listening to what's going on here. We're having this discussion back and forth about lots of different issues, and if you're really listening, then you know how to answer, if you're a skilled applicant, right?
Trust me, they
Yeah.
listen, they get it, and that answer to what I asked before is less than half paragraph. The building is 3,500 square foot in footprint. Number of stories is 3. 3,500 times 3 times this number is this. Total load of the building is X. Since a pile can take Y, total number of piles could be X divided by Y.
But
100 piles, period, done.
Right, but what I'm getting at is rather than getting into the fine grain answer, there's a bigger question that's presented by this discussion.
I got that.
And the applicant should be listening. This is a message to the applicant. Please listen. Really, really listen to what's going on here. There, you can see the question before us is, are your construction costs in line with construction costs in the neighborhood? That's it. And so prove it. Don't just say they are. Prove that they are by some kind of data source that proves that they are. The other one is this site unique, this 35-foot wide vacant lot? Is it unique in this area? If so, why? What's unique about it, and what imposes the hardship that prevents you from using it for a conforming use? Those are like very basic questions where the answer should be really written by the person who's in charge of making an argument, which, by the way, is the lawyer. And when the lawyer tries to make an argument, it should be supported by materials provided by the other consultants. And when you're making the argument, you know, this is a question for a cost estimator. This is a question for a real estate broker, right? But you have to put the argument together. And I think one of the reasons this has been a long discussion is we're being asked to put the argument together, and that's really
Yes.
not our job, right? So,
And by the way, the concept of the cost per square foot is in our notice back in January 2018. I believe we mentioned
Yes.
in this notice that if you have a tiny project and you just want to give us like a square foot price for the construction cost, we can take that.
right, as
And
long as
if it's, of course, if it's reasonable.
right.
So we're just asking for answers to what color is this?
Yes,
And it shouldn't be, it's 6 o'clock.
right.
It should be, it's either black, white, red. Give me a feasible answer so we can move on.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Everybody, Commissioner Shibeta?
I have
you're good?
nothing,
Okay.
nothing more to
Okay.
add.
Good.
You wanted to know about the number of months, the...
Yeah, how long has that been on the
Yeah,
market?
98 and 96, 9 months. And the price did come down 4 months ago.
It came down from what? Does it say? Oh, it doesn't say from, Street Easy usually tells you where it was.
Asking.
Yeah.
Last price change, this one it says 505,000, about 4 months ago.
Wow.
And
What we're hearing, what I've been reading, but I don't know if it applies in this neighborhood, so it's probably not neighborhood specific, is that rents are going up and sales prices are going down on certain levels, but just not certain levels of purchase price, right? But rents are definitely going up. So that kind of reinforces Commissioner Otley Brown's comment about the rental of that whole structure. Anyway, okay.
Yeah.
Item number 24, 2018-56 BZ, 83 Coleridge Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, the flood regulation objections were resolved at DOB. The FAR study area map provided shows 3 buildings across the street from the site in line with the proposed floor area of .934, although most houses are significantly less than that, which is what we know from all of these 622 applications. Lot coverage study shows the proposed is in line with houses on the same and the opposite block. The existing walls to remain at the exterior, though, on the demo plan, don't match the proposed plans. They need to clarify the walls to remain and dimension them on the proposed drawings to match the demo drawings, and also indicate that the yard locations are the same. So we kind of learned that on another application recently where there was a claim that the walls were being retained and the existing yards were just, say, 8 feet, or let's say 10 feet, and then the yards were changed to 8 feet, and then, but the wall was called out as being wall to remain. How in the world can the wall remain if it's moving 2 feet over? So that can't be, so they need to make sure, and I found that the yards were not matching, it seemed. Or they were off by a little bit, so that could be just the unfortunate reality of CAD, where if you measure it using the CAD program and it doesn't hold the same. So that needs to be corrected. It also doesn't look like any of the joists are remaining since all of the floors are being lifted. So they need to explain how the existing floor area is going to be retained. And then at the last hearing, we asked that the architect clarify whether the actual cellar, the one that's subterranean, would be filled in, and that wasn't answered. Maybe it is, it's kind of unclear. So they need to respond to that. Any other comment? Yeah.
Yes, they gave us a FAR, a lot coverage study, and an open space ratio study, and they report on that study in their statement, and they talk about the 400-foot radius. However, if you look at the map while you're reading, you'll find that they're not using just the 400-foot radius. They're actually totaling everything from the whole map, which may be distorting the findings. So they need to be clear about what they're talking about so that we have an idea of what they actually find and what it actually represents. Is it the larger neighborhood or is it the 400-foot radius?
Item number 25, 2018-164BZ, 7271 Casina Boulevard, Queens.
So this one, they actually requested a withdrawal. They say the DOB allowed the drive-through as a non-conforming accessory use. So you might ask, why didn't they do that a while ago? Instead of having us review their project for them. Okay.
New cases, item number 1, 2018-154BZ, 966 East 24th Street, Brooklyn.
Okay, we have proof of initial service to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approvals. I note there are arithmetic errors on both the first and second floor existing to remain calculations, but when I do the correction, make the corrections, the result is still more than 50%. What they did was they kind of held a number in there, but did the math using a different number. So it's just really the number is the wrong number, whereas the answer is the right answer. It just feels like algebra classes. You got the right answer, but the formula is completely wrong. Floor plans themselves don't show the same walls to remain as on the demo calculations. They need to make that much clearer on the drawings and add the note that removal of existing exterior walls in excess of those shown on the plan will void the special permit. The FAR study shows that 1 FAR is the maximum that should be permitted here. Just to clarify for architects, 1 FAR of a 4,000 square foot lot is 4,000 square feet. It isn't 4,002 square feet or 4,200 square feet. It's 4,000 square feet. The rear yard study shows 22-foot rear yards adjacent to the subject, but as usual, doesn't tell us the heights of the rear yard incursion. They need to provide that information. The site plan shows that the rear yards of the adjacent homes line up with the existing building on the subject site that has a 24-foot rear yard. So how do they have 22-foot rear yards, which is what's shown on the rear yard study? The site plan shows that those buildings adjacent are 2.5 stories. I think that's actually from the survey. So this tells me that the rear yard incursion at the second floor cannot exceed a depth that lines up with the neighbors, and the third floor has to pull back to be compliant, because there's no reason, especially if you look at what's up there, for it not to. The house is really massive compared to the neighbors, and now taller than all of the similar houses on the block. I don't see the justification for the 2-foot increase in height. It's already 34 feet high. So I think they should just bring it down in height. And if they need more height on the attic level, splay the roof more. Don't have it such a pitch, the pitch so extreme. Other comments?
The elevation, the labeling for the elevations for the front and the rear are incorrect, so just they need to check that. I would like the applicant to confirm the highest and the lowest ceiling height in the attic bedroom, because the ceiling height in the attic is, I just eyeballed it, it seems to be 9 feet in the bedroom and 11 feet in the hallway. And the ceiling height of the attic, as I think going to the point, question you raised, can be reduced and allow for a shallower pitch of a front roof to bring the height down. With regards to the 400-foot radius, what is the total number of homes within the 400-foot radius to determine the percentage? And that's it.
Anybody else? Okay.
Done? Item number 2, 2018-168 BZ, 1769 East 26th Street, Brooklyn.
We have proof of service of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends approval with 6 opposed, 2 abstaining. I think that's because there was testimony at the hearing by an immediate neighbor to the rear. We have a strong letter of opposition from a neighbor at the rear stating that the proposal would be out of character with the neighborhood and concerned about the depth of the rear yard. The proposed is a straight line extension to the rear at both the first and the second floor, leaving a 23-foot 5-inch rear yard on a block where very deep rear yards are the norm, well, much deeper than 30 feet. The statement of facts is incorrect about the proposed depth, so it should have been aligned with the actual drawings. In consideration of the impact that the second floor will have on the immediate neighbors, because the first floor, again, there's garages, I think the second floor should be pulled back to allow for a 27-foot rear yard. That way, the neighbor won't feel as claustrophobic by that, and it's certainly possible to do. It's a very large extension because the original rear yard is 46 feet or something like that. So, rear yard, 45 feet.
44 feet is the existing rear yard.
No, but it's actually from the drawings, it's 4411. And the statement of facts is incorrect about the proposed rear yard. It's proposed to be 23-foot 5, not 24-foot 8. Okay. Anybody else? No?
Item number 3, 2019-15 BZ, 7940 Cooper Avenue, Queens.
Okay. We have proof of filing of initial application to officials and of notice of hearing to officials and neighbors. Community Board recommends conditional approval, citing many concerns about traffic and safety of children and the possibility of inadequate parking of all the uses. There is a threshold question about whether the proposed use satisfies the Section 1210 definition of school, the defined term school. There was a submission by the applicant that suggests that the daycare program for the 6 to 12-year-olds is somehow accessory to the Article 47 daycare for 5 and under. I need a lot more to understand whether we consider that use as accessory. I don't actually understand how you say it's an accessory use. What they ended up doing was kind of throwing us a stack of C of Os and stuff. I don't see, DOB doesn't look at the program, right? They don't look at, oh, you mean you have 6-year-olds and over, and is that meeting the use group 3 definition and so on? So to throw C of Os at us isn't helpful, right? And, you know, so they have to establish it. I just don't really understand how you get to accessory use for that. And then the comment from the applicant would be something like, it just wouldn't be fair if you didn't allow this. Well, but we have a threshold question, and that's what we have the authority to grant. So they need to work on that, and they really did a very weak job on that one. There's also no discussion about that school age program and how it operates, nothing. It didn't even, actually, they didn't mention it after the first sentence. The applicant did demonstrate that to my mind, that they looked for other sites and neighborhoods in their catchment area where the use would be conforming and found none. They also, to my mind, they demonstrated with a map that the site is within 400 feet of the district where the use would be conforming. Those are the threshold questions. The statement of fact states that parent guardians who drive the children to the facility must park first and bring the children into the building, which is very different from what we see in a lot of other facilities like this, where there's a person who comes out to the sidewalk and takes the child, right? So the facility is large enough for 167 children, with modal splits and arrivals at 2 different set times, plus 37 staff members. I don't understand how 32 parking spaces are enough to satisfy the demand, because you could have, whatever the actual number of people driving, they're supposed to pull into the parking lot and park and escort their children into the facility, which requires them to go on a little bit of a walk before they actually get there, so that's time. Right. I didn't.
But they should answer your question, because they also say that they're going to have daycare staff stationed outside the building during arrival and dismissal. So maybe they're considering that some people just will literally stop the car and drop the kid with a staff member. I don't know, but they should fill in that information.
Right, okay. I also didn't find backup data from the traffic consultant for the modal split analysis. They have this assumption that 85% of the children will walk to the site. That's a lot of kids walking to the site. And granted, it's just across the street from an R district, but where do they get that number from? And then, and the whole thing is really depending on that, because the modal split for driving, I think, is 5% arriving by car, 1% by taxi, and 3% by subway. But where's the subway?
Subway to bus, it can't be.
Yeah, so it's by bus, it's 3% by subway to the bus. Does that make it 9%? I don't know, because there are 6% by bus. So I don't feel like the study is tied to this actual condition. Instead, it's sort of this general census tract study as opposed to actually looking at where this is. That's what it feels like, anyway. Then also, I'm asking, so there's this route to the entrance from the bus stops, which is very circuitous. So you're going, you cross the street from the bus stops, which is this heavy traffic crash data location, and you come to the corner, and then they ask you to walk all the way around the building the long way to bring the kids to the front door. And meanwhile, there's a driveway right there at the corner, and if it were me and I'm in a rush and I'm like, I gotta get this kid to school,
I'm walking up that driveway because it's a much faster route to the front door. So I'm just thinking, there's going to be all these parents with little kids walking in the driveway once they've figured this out, and the cars sort of confronting them somehow, and there's no sidewalk. So that's the other thing. If you put a sidewalk there, then it's a direct path of travel from the corner
I
to
would say,
the,
sorry, I think they have a doorway right on Cooper Avenue.
that's a fire exit.
But the line of I mean, it just can be modified to
Yeah.
become the secondary and another
Right.
entry point. I don't think the fire exit is meant to be only for fire exit purposes. It can also be an entryway. So they could provide two entryways, one through the parking lot and one through Cooper Avenue. And that would address the concern. I have similar concern about having parents to walk, those who are walking their kids, to walk all the way.
Right.
And the grade does change. So you're walking a little bit downhill. So you're better off actually just walking right off Cooper. And the line of visibility based on the site plan, the security desk is at the other end, so they have a clear line of visibility to the fire exit also. So it's just a matter of redesigning it a little bit to allow for a little bit bigger holding area for the children there.
I think the issue, though, is there obviously security concerns, so, as you said, and if you look at unlike another one of these daycare centers that we looked at where the layout is terrible and they force strangers to walk past the classrooms to get to the elevator and all of that, this one, the layout is very sensible. You go past a little security desk, then there's reception, then you start to distribute the kids according to their age groups and stuff. If you have people entering from Cooper, they're in the classrooms. You don't want to have parents coming through past the classrooms. So, because I was looking at that too, and I was thinking, maybe the answer is to flip the design, but then you don't have any convenience in terms of parking. So, but it's right, so the whole drop-off thing doesn't really seem to be working well. So that's the thing. And then the last part was we got a very long set of comments from school safety.
It's not school safety. They actually it's not under their jurisdiction because of the size, but they sense it's traffic and engineering in DOT. So it's actually traffic and engineering.
DOT.
But school safety requested traffic and engineering to review
Okay.
it.
Yeah.
So they gave those very detailed comments.
Okay.
And just to clarify what Joe said, it's not a jurisdiction, it's below the threshold.
Bless you.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Below the threshold because of the number of kids?
Yeah.
167 kids is below the
Yes,
threshold?
250 is typically
For a
always
daycare.
been their threshold as
For
far
that.
as a child safety review.
But I wanted review, so they
Right.
said the traffic and engineering.
Okay, so there are a lot of comments that the applicant needs to respond to. Some of them are similar to what we talked about here. Other questions that I had is, they tell us that meals are served, breakfast, lunch, and snacks, and there's no place for trash storage at all, none. Not to mention refrigerated trash storage. The rooftop play area fencing, I know fire department will not be okay with it because it goes right to the parapet wall. So they need to look at that. DEP's air quality analysis they responded to us, but this is again where we don't clarify what the scope of our review is. They're looking at it from a seeker perspective, and they say this project won't impact air quality, but that's the question is the other way around. Is the neighborhood air quality an issue for children? And in this case, there's children on the roof. So is there an issue for children to be playing on the roof here?
Follow up and ask that.
Yeah.
If they looked at that. as
Right, well, they didn't comment on it in their letter.
It's possible they still looked at it though, because
Okay.
they usually look at the surrounding area,
Okay.
but it's possible.
Okay, and then in terms of noise, unlike what the applicant represented in their cover letter, DEP actually does require window wall attenuation of 23 dBA with a closed window condition and alternate means of ventilation. That has to be shown on the drawings. And they also the applicant has to comment on the, DEP also has to comment on the appropriateness of the play roof, because if you have to attenuate noise, is it okay that kids are playing on the roof? Though I'm taking a wild guess, kids make much more noise than 73 dBA. And then we don't yet have hazmat sign off. Other comments?
So the storage space, I mean, there was, DOT had some questions about the storage space and the layout. The storage space is complete, though it's not part of the
Yeah.
subject site, so it's complete and it seems it's operational. I have concern regarding the traffic circulation, especially the approach from Cooper Avenue to 79th Place is challenging. The 79th Place as built is not the same as mapped. So the approach to 79th Place, first of all, it goes down a steep incline, and there's a curve, immediate curve, and it's a two-way street. So vehicles turning right from Cooper onto 79th Place are likely to have an issue with those vehicles that are turning from 79th Place, either going straight or turning left or right, because there's just not enough space for that. So that is something I'm assuming DOT is going to look at and make sure, because that will affect how the backup of traffic onto Cooper Avenue if the vehicles are coming along Cooper Avenue mostly and dropping children off, because the parking lot approach is off 79th.
So they're just reviewing this for safety, not really as a seeker review?
I see.
Yeah.
I see.
They have
Okay.
to redo, they actually fall under threshold in terms of seeker
Okay.
review. However, they are redoing their trip generation
Okay.
at the request
Okay.
of DOT, so they might, once that's finished, they might fall under seeker review.
Okay, so then I will let
then they'll look into
I'll
it.
let DOT's viewpoint on that. Interestingly enough, the site right next to the school site was rezoned from manufacturing to R4. And it did not have an E designation, so I'm just kind of curious what DEP's, it's the abutting site to the subject site.
You're
It was
curious.
rezoned to R4s, and it did not have an E designation, so even for noise and other things, so I'm just kind of, and air quality, so.
So in other words, the environmental consultant should be looking at that rezoning?
I think so, it was a recent rezoning. I could be wrong, but I did not see an E mark there, no.
Well, you don't you mean that there would be an E designation for noise to...
And air quality, yeah.
And, well, air quality, we don't know that there's an air quality issue at all, but we do know there's a closed window condition requirement.
Right.
So maybe they
Right.
don't know. Okay. Anybody else?
I agree with the chair that I just need more information about the school-aged after-school program, how they arrive, when they arrive, how they depart, when they depart, times, information, how many students, all of that.
Okay.
I too was concerned with threshold question. I also I was a bit confused, if all the pre-K program and infant and toddler programs are going to be on the first floor, or if they're on the higher floors as well?
I think pre-Ks are on the higher floors. There's one pre-K on lower floor and the rest are all on the second floor.
So I remember reading on a separate case that all pre-K toddler services have to be on the first floor pursuant to the Department
No,
of
no,
Health.
there's a rule about how high in the building they can be, but it is the very teeny kids who have to
The
be on the
infants
first floor, because
got
in
it.
a fire, they have to carry them out, right? Whereas the kids
Daycare.
who are older can walk down the stairs, but they can't walk down that many stairs. That's why they
It's
need
the second and
approval.
third floor.
Yeah.
is-
It's the third and, it's the third floor, I think, is the question or the max, right?
Right.
But this is only a two-story building, so. Okay, yeah.
Ready? Done? Okay, this concludes the public review session for June 24, 2019.